nation,
indivisible,
under God,
with liberty and
indivisible,
justice for all.
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome. I've got a number of open forum items here to start us off, and then we'll recognize any open forum issues from the public. First off, we want to offer our heartfelt appreciation for Jim Antonelli for his 29 years of service to Westford Public Schools. Jim began his career in Westford in 1993 as a student teacher. He was a student here before that, so it goes back a little bit further. And he was a classroom teacher, dean of student activities, assistant principal, and then became principal in 2007. I know generations of Westford ghosts are very grateful for everything that Jim has done for the system, and I know we wish him very best of luck in his future endeavors. I don't know if anyone else has any words for Jim before we, well, I guess he's already moved on and started his new thing, I think, but much missed.
Yeah.
Excellent. And also, we want to congratulate and welcome Dan Toomey, not welcome Dan, because he's been part of our schools for a long time, but he has become the new Westford Academy principal. Dan began at Westford Academy as the director of athletics and then dean of students since 2017. Thank you for your service, Dan, and we're excited to have you in this new role, so welcome. We have a lot to celebrate tonight. We also wanted to congratulate Alan Kwan for winning the Regional Braille Championship and becoming a finalist in the 2023 Braille Finals in Los Angeles. The top 50 students with the highest scores in the country competed last weekend. So he was one of the top 50 students in the country. Competed last week in June, and Alan ranked among the top 10 in the varsity level. So congratulations to Alan and his family for that. We'd like to recognize Westford's 18-year-old Molly Smith for becoming the first woman to qualify for the Massachusetts Amateur Championship for golf in its 90-year history. Molly tied for 51st in the 144-player field and missed the cut to advance by 4 strokes. Congratulations to Molly. And finally, on this first group, congratulate 5th grader Wyatt Wong, who will compete in the Ultimate Ninja Athlete Association World Championship this weekend in Florida. He's there tonight with his family. The challenge is to compete for the fastest time in a given obstacle course, and Wyatt ranks 19th in the 11 under division. So congratulations and good luck tomorrow and over the weekend next week for Wyatt. Any other open forum items from the board? Okay, anything from the public? Okay, we are at our 7:10 item, which is the consent agenda. Request to approve the following: the Town and Common and Bandstand, the event the Indian Flag Raising. The applicant is Jayanthi Jatruju. The date is August 6th, 2023, and the time is 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Also, a request for the banner for special town meeting. The applicant is Town Manager's Office. The date is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023 through Monday, October 16th, 2023. Location is First Parish Church. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
A second.
Second.
All in favor, John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Andrea? Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that. Okay, next up is our 7:15 item, which is a joint meeting with the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee to hear an update on the town's investment grade audit being performed by the energy service company Amoresco. We're going to get a presentation from Beth Greenblatt, who is our consultant from Beacon Integrated Solutions. And Mike, do you want to bring your committee into session?
Yes, I will do that.
Come up here.
Hi, Mike Berlinski, Chair of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. We have a number of members here in the room, and I think there might be some online as well. I don't know if you can check to see if any are online. But I expect we'll have a quorum with a combination of in the room and online.
Thomas Teller online. Eric's just checking the others. We also have staff Sue Thomas, Sustainability Coordinator, online.
Okay, great. And we're going to elevate them to panelists.
Yes, we are doing
Okay.
that now.
Great.
And in the room, we have Erica Cole, Beth Perkins, Sriman Banerjee, Matt Riegert.
Great.
So far, yep.
Welcome. Welcome. So you've called to order.
So yes, so we'll
Okay.
call our Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee joint meeting with the Select Board to order.
Great. Welcome. I guess we're going to start off with Beth without further ado.
I'll give
You want to give a
2 seconds of
quick
opening
welcome? Okay.
remarks. So,
Thanks, Kristen.
Since I started back in February, there's been conversations about a firm named Amoresco that the town of Westford hired to perform audits related to energy efficiency and related to potential projects for cost savings as well as energy efficiency. I've been taking the past 6 months to get up to speed on that, and in conversations with staff, with board members, and with Beth Greenblatt. There has been some confusion related to how Amoresco was brought into the process in 2022, then with the Cameron Senior Center related to the HVAC project, and a miss related to the cost estimating related to that project, and then kind of a stall in the process. So we feel that it's best to bring Beth on board as our town's consultant to explain what performance contracting is, what we hired Amoresco to do, and where we see the process moving forward. So that's really the goal of this evening, and we wanted to have the select board and the CEASC at the same meeting so everyone could be hearing the same presentation, listening to the same questions, and hearing the same answers so that everyone is on the same page moving forward. So without further ado, I think we're ready for Beth to give her presentation.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you very much. Kristen, did you want me to share screen? Oh, Eric's got it under control. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here this evening and sort of give a recap as to where this project has been since it originated with the community and where it is hoping to go on a forward-looking basis. Just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, Eric, do I have the power to scooch, or are you advancing the slide? Excellent. Just by way of background, my firm is a woman-owned energy management solutions firm. We specialize in energy management services, performance contracting solutions, which is what the town is in the process of potentially pursuing, traditional renewable energy solutions, energy analysis, and energy procurement services. We are certified by the Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office as a woman-owned business enterprise, and we're qualified under the state contract PRF 74 to provide these exact types of services. Again, our services are comprehensive, but our major goal is to help the communities in which we serve. We always sit on your side of the fence, and our goal is to help our clients achieve their goals. And I think, as you'll hear as we go through this presentation, my objective always is to help the community develop a strategy and then put implementation plans in place in order for you to achieve your goals. With that, if we could go to slide 3. So it's my understanding that Westford's goals are robust and very aggressive. At a special town meeting in October 2020, town meeting resoundingly voted in favor of a net zero solution with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the town to zero by 2050. This is generally consistent with the objectives of the Commonwealth, which is terrific. The Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, which I've been privileged to work with members of as part of this project, developed the Westford Climate Roadmap, and version V2 was offered to the select board earlier in the year, and it's my understanding that it was fully adopted by June of 2023. In June of 2023. A key focus is a number of areas were of focus in the climate roadmap, as the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee knows all too well. Transforming electric supply purchases to 100% renewable energy and producing renewable energy locally, electrifying heating and cooling systems, increasing overall energy efficiency throughout the town, and driving EV and plug-in hybrid vehicles. There are several other goals that I did not address specifically in this because they don't specifically pertain to energy, but they clearly pertain to our climate situation we're in. Next slide, please. So, as you all know, with an aggressive and an appropriately ambitious strategy, it takes a village to implement. As my clients always hear me say, their goals and the Commonwealth's goals are appropriately ambitious, aspirational, hard, but achievable, and tend to be expensive. So getting from point A to point B requires a thoughtful and a strategic approach. Westford initiated its process to use an energy management services project as an implementation tool. This project is authorized under a specific procurement statute in the Commonwealth, Mass General Laws, Chapter 25A, Section 11I, and it's designed to be a tool to help you undertake comprehensive clean and renewable energy projects that address energy efficiency upgrades and enhancement on municipal buildings and facilities. It is a very comprehensive, all-hands-on-deck effort to identify and implement comprehensive upgrades that enable you to achieve your goals. So when I look at your goals and I look at how you can use performance contracting, energy management services as it's known in Massachusetts, as a real strategic tool for the community, I look at it in three different ways. There's good, and good is traditional historical performance contracting, where you implement energy projects that reduce energy consumption. And it's a focus basically on energy consumption reduction and cost savings. That's a good strategy. But a better strategy that will help you get closer to achieving your climate goals is to focus not only on the reduction of energy consumption, but also the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And in doing that, there are challenges and decisions that need to be made to help focus where the project is going. And then, of course, the best approach would be an initial focus on greenhouse gas reduction that also saves energy. And that would be full electrification or full renewable solution or some combination thereof. And again, as I mentioned above, ambitious, aspirational, hard, but achievable and expensive when you get to the best. So I have increasingly encouraged my clients to look at the good scenario, because that's good. It helps you renew infrastructure, save energy. As a result, there will be greenhouse gas reductions, but it's a focus on capital investments that generate energy savings as the primary goal. And there will be, as I just mentioned, greenhouse gas reductions identified as part of that process. To develop a comprehensive package of improvements that produce enough savings on an annual basis to offset annual debt service costs. So a debt exclusion would not be necessary. These projects integrate all utility incentives, any federal funds from ESSER, ARPA, ARA, IRA, and in the infrastructure legislation, basically the alphabet soup of opportunities that we can get into the flow of that stream of money, and any state grants or incentives, and any budgeted capital resources. So it's really utilizing all available resources to help bring down the cost, develop a project that basically pays for itself, relying on the annual energy savings to pay for the cost. Decarbonization efforts will really only be achieved in that regard through reduced energy usage, and electrification measures and town-owned renewable solutions tend not to be prioritized as part of these projects unless there is a sufficient, robust amount of energy savings to help pay for them. The results is you have energy infrastructure upgrades implemented that are designed to reduce consumption, improve building comfort, and achieve a level of greenhouse gas emission reductions. Energy savings are guaranteed for the term of the agreement, which means on an annual basis, the energy services company, in this case Ameresco, is required to guarantee to you based on a agreed upon protocol that is authorized not only by the Commonwealth, but an industry standard with respect to how an energy services company would measure and verify savings. The metrics annually are energy usage and cost savings, greenhouse gas reductions, and in this case, budget neutrality. There is no shortfall of savings to pay for the cost. So that's a good project. A better project is one that focuses on capital investments that indeed saves energy, and it advances the town's objective to achieve higher levels of greenhouse gas reductions. There is a comprehensive package of energy investments that produces the annual savings, and those annual savings may partially offset the annual debt service obligation, which means the savings are insufficient to pay for all of the costs of the project construction. Decarbonization efforts will be achieved through targeted, specific electrification solutions as appropriate, renewable generation options, and obviously energy savings investments. The results is infrastructure upgrades are implemented. They're designed to reduce energy consumption, improve building consumption comfort, and have a meaningful impact on greenhouse gas reductions. Energy savings are guaranteed for the term of the agreement, as with the good project, and the metrics here are, of course, energy usage and cost savings should be similar or better to the good scenario, but greenhouse gas reductions will be greater than the good scenario. Helps you get closer to that climate action goal that you're striving to achieve by 2050. Debt service, as I mentioned earlier, will not likely be sufficient to offset the energy cost savings alone. A debt exclusion or available free cash may be required to help fund the project. So as you can see, good is good, better is going to help you get closer to your goals ultimately. So what is the status of the Energy Management Services relationship with Ameresco? I have not been engaged in this process since the last special town meeting last fall, but I have recently been brought up to speed and have a very good understanding of where the project is at this point. Ameresco was engaged to conduct a comprehensive investment grade audit in March of 2022. So this is sort of a status of where we are and how we got here. They commenced data collection, they reviewed the data and conducted some analysis on a portfolio of buildings and facilities for all energy consuming end uses. So they have a significant database of information on town facilities. The Senior Center Comprehensive HVAC Upgrade Project became the central focus of the IGA, including Ameresco conducting due diligence on the engineering analysis provided by the town. So the town, as you know, had engaged a design engineer to design a solution. The solution was provided to Ameresco. Ameresco had to do their due diligence on the solution in order to be in a position to guarantee the results of the savings associated with that project. They began to develop the bid project specifications, and they sought out competitive pricing for the implementation. They then provided support at the special town meeting held in the fall, held on October 17, 2022. At around that time, it's my understanding that the then Westford town manager paused the IGA process in October 2022 to focus staff resources on undertaking a traditional implementation strategy for the Senior Center HVAC project, which was implemented under Mass General Laws Chapter 149. The thought, as I understand it, was that the town would realize a better overall, more advantageous, and financially less costly solution. It is also my understanding that project has not moved forward, has not concluded, and is still sort of under evaluation. Okay, if we could move, Eric, move to the next slide, please. Ameresco was contacted in March of 2023 to discuss resuming the IGA, and with Kristen joining the team, the town and Ameresco met in April of 2023 to brief Kristen and the staff on the project status and their expected next steps. My firm was re-engaged just this month as owner's agent to provide support to the town. It is my understanding from Amoresco that they have reallocated their internal resources to pick up where they left off and commence the IGA process. As I'm sure you can imagine, when they were asked to pause the work they were doing, they reallocated their staff to other projects, and they have now re-engaged those staff back into the Westford project. Amoresco is currently developing the preliminary audit findings with an expected deliverable in mid-August of 2023, which, based on some direction they recently got from me, will include good and better scenarios for your consideration. So I thought it would be beneficial, since I know there's a lot of confusion, and for anyone who has looked at the very comprehensive contract that Amoresco engaged in with the town, there's really two deliverables. There's an initial deliverable, which is the preliminary audit. And that will provide the town with the technical potential for energy savings across your portfolio. It is a very high-level conceptual design with targeted energy savings, not fully engineered, not fully interacted with the other energy savings improvements that would be implemented. There'll be estimated project costs using Amoresco's proprietary database of costs, so they're budgeted, they're not actual comprehensive bid out costs, and there'll be a general description of project scope. At that point, the town will have some direction and decisions to make. They need to, you all need to provide Amoresco with direction on project constraints, and that includes any borrowing capacity restrictions, any borrowing term limitations that you want to impose. You can go up to 20 years with the borrowing. You may choose to do a shorter term. Any debt exclusion limitations. For example, there'll be no debt exclusion. If that's the constraint the town puts on the project, Amoresco will refocus the project to meet those constraints. Any key capital projects, like the senior center project, that was certainly a key capital project, among other types of constraints, that it is the town's responsibility to constrain the project. And then confirm project selection. Once that's done, Amoresco will commence the full deep dive investment grade audit. I'd like to say that the preliminary audit is at a 30,000 foot level, and they do a much deeper dive to get to the investment grade audit. The deliverables will include a comprehensive energy savings analysis with the project selection at about 30% design for all of the major projects. It will include narratives. The narrative will include the interactive impacts of the bundled projects across the municipal buildings and facilities that are targeted from the preliminary audit. Project costs are derived from contractor quotations and are based on a much more comprehensive developed scope of work. Performance guarantee metrics and methodologies presented are based on your preference and industry accepted standards. Before I move on to what the decision-making process would be, I think one of the things that differentiates the investment grade audit from the preliminary audit, and if we go back to my original discussion about good and better, if you choose good as an example, good would be taking an old, aging, natural gas-fired, inefficient boiler and replacing it with a new, much more highly efficient natural gas boiler. Doesn't get you toward electrification, but it will certainly reduce energy, and it will certainly provide cost savings throughout the life of the improvement. If that is the first choice in a particular building, anything you do beyond that is based on the premise that you still have a natural gas-fired boiler heating the building. And so every other project that they recommend, that they specify, and that they provide energy savings is based on saving natural gas, and the technologies and the projects that they propose is to help control that natural gas boiler and the distribution network that is fed from that natural gas boiler. In a better situation, potentially, where you may electrify the building, you may put in geothermal or heat pump technology, the types of recommendations that would follow from that one selection and the level of detail that would be needed for an investment grade audit, not only on savings, but costs, is driven by that initial recommendation or that initial decision. And that's why Amoresco has been encouraging and working with town staff to winnow the preliminary audit to the project opportunities that are likely to be implemented under a contract. At that point, Amoresco will deliver their very thorough, very comprehensive investment grade audit. The scope of that is well defined in your contract. The decision the town can make is accept the audit as presented or propose changes to the scope and finalize the overall project, negotiate the agreement with Amoresco, and secure financing for comprehensive construction activities, all under a full scope design build program. So there's no need to go out and seek and solicit for an OPM. You have engaged a firm to do all of that and provide project management, construction management, full construction services for all of the projects at all occurring within the same general time frame, and reporting up to the town as to progress on a regular basis. Typically every 2-week project meetings, meeting minutes, all of what you would expect from any large-scale construction project. Alternatively, assuming the delivered IGA meets the rigorous requirements that were set forth in the agreement, accept the IGA as presented, pay the breakup fee, and self-implement the infrastructure projects on an incremental basis. So you have a tool, you decide you don't want to proceed forward with a performance contract, Amoresco has delivered their product to you, you may use that product and self-implement. So we have advised, as a result of some recent conversations with Jeff and Eric and Kristen, we have advised Amoresco to focus its preliminary audit to provide the town with a good scenario that, again, optimizes energy savings opportunities, consider some Amoresco-owned renewable generation solutions that are contracted under a power purchase agreement, so they own them, define the greenhouse gas reductions from the energy consumption reductions. So yes, you reduce your energy footprint, there will be greenhouse gas reductions. And rely on 100% of the guaranteed energy savings to fully offset annual debt payment obligations, which means there is no, after taking into consideration all external sources of funding from federal and state sources and utility incentives, the combination of those funds plus the annual energy savings is sufficient to offset the debt service obligation. So that's the good we've asked them to put together. The better focuses on effective electrification options while also optimizing the energy savings opportunities. Presenting Amoresco-owned renewable generation solutions, so you're not spending your capital potentially on something that can otherwise provide value to the town without using capital dollars, where you can use capital dollars to invest in other expensive things like electrification. Define the greenhouse gas reductions from not only the energy consuming or the energy saving measures, but also from the electrification projects. And require additional sources of funds in excess of energy savings to meet debt service is probably going to be a scenario where the town will need to achieve the better scenario. It is likely the town will either need to seek a debt exclusion or look to see if there's another source of funds that can help cover the annual debt service. Both the good and better scenarios will include a general description of the proposed projects to enable you to understand the general scope of work. So you'll have a very detailed solution presented to you. In terms of, I'm calling it an illustrative milestone schedule because, of course, I'm here to support the town in implementing this, but I'm not providing those deliverables. So I think it's achievable. I presented it to Amoresco as a anticipated milestone schedule, and it seemed to be something they felt very achievable. So I feel relatively confident this is something that can be achieved through the continued work between the parties. The preliminary audit deliverable from Amoresco, as I mentioned, is expected in mid-August. I envision working sessions with stakeholders to optimize the project selection based on previously defined strategy in late August or early September, as soon as possible, where the parties can get together, review all and work together to really optimize and focus Amoresco on a comprehensive solution, whether it's the good solution, the better solution, or something in between. Amoresco will deliver the comprehensive investment grade audit in December of 2023. And together, Westford and Amoresco will present the findings to various stakeholder groups, to the Select Board, Energy Committee, Capital Planning Committee, Finance Committee, any other committees that are appropriate to get a handle on what this project might look like, what it's going to cost, what the savings are, the impact it has on town budgets. I'm anticipating project acceptance and submission of an article for town meeting warrant by the end of January for a presentation to town meeting at the annual town meeting in March 2024. The result of which, with approval of town meeting, to enter into a long-term agreement with Amoresco and authorize the Select Board to secure financing. I anticipate a 20-year energy management services agreement with Amoresco, which will require a majority vote, and authorize the borrowing, which will require a 2/3 vote. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Beth. Mike, why don't I entertain questions from the board first and then from the committee?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Questions from the board about this plan? I think it's pretty clear. I guess the question embedded in this is, do we feel good about this good and better plan approach? So we'll have a chance to look at not just the self-funded, but the self-funded that I would imagine would include some heavy hitters that might give a good bang for the buck to advance us towards our climate goal. And we'd have a chance to look at both, decide between them, and then whichever one we decide on would go forward for the detailed, complete audit.
I mean, it seems like, who is picking you do the 30,000 foot level on everything. That's the idea to do it for August? That seems pretty aggressive. Is that, we're already in, let's look at July, right?
Yeah.
So in 2 weeks, can we do that?
Beth, I think you've had discussions with them and you feel it's a reasonable thing. I guess this would be in our next meeting for them to come, either the next meeting or the meeting following, where they would come and present this preliminary look at the good and the better plan, using the language you've been using here?
Yes, I had a conversation with them about that. They have all the information they need to put together these two projects. They've been struggling to try to put together a project that they think meets your goals with your constraints. And so I've given them direction to put together a project, and the constraint I put on it was one that did not require additional budget to support the project, and another one that worked toward helping better achieve the climate goals, so the good and the better. And candidly, you know, I'd like to say that traditional performance contracting is the good. And most of the energy services companies that I'm working with, their default position is always the good, because that's what they've been doing for 40 years. And with climate change and with communities being aggressive and active in pursuing climate action goals and climate action plans, as the energy service industry is now sort of taking themselves out of the box and are encouraged by the ability to provide you with opportunities that help you get to your next step. So they've indicated to me they have all the data they need. They can put these two packages together. For sure, they won't be perfect, because It's what their perception is of what you might ultimately want to do. And so, as I mentioned, you'll have two different packages with a lot of details to look at and say, we'd like to not do this and instead do this. So I expect that after the stakeholders all meet, once you have your preliminary audit in mid-August, which they've indicated is what they can accomplish, that collectively you'll end up with something that perhaps is somewhere in between or on one side of the equation.
And these are town buildings only, right? Not school buildings?
There are town and school buildings combined.
So how does this gel with the school facility study?
So it's really, right now, existing facility. They've done the audit on the existing facilities. So if there's any building that might be retrofitted or taken down and rebuilt related to the school study, that may be eliminated from this. And that's something we would have to have a conversation internally with facilities and schools.
Yeah, because I recall many of the school buildings, they're talking about renovating or retrofitting, so I guess I would wonder how many of those buildings gets taken out of this study as a result of that.
Or maybe that this approach is the means by which to accomplish the goals that are outlined in the school's facility study. Because in many cases, the goals outlined in that study are, energy related. So this could be a pathway to do it too.
True, but
I think this first cut, I believe, would include all the buildings, and then we may have to go back to them and exclude and say, you know what, the Robinson building is really being considered for some totally different purpose. We need to take it out of scope, for example. Okay, why don't we think a little bit more and see if there are other questions, Mike? Let's see if your team has any questions that you'd like to ask Beth.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I do have some comments and some questions, and I'll encourage other folks on the committee to share their comments and questions as well, both in the room and online. But thank you for including us. As you may remember from a previous select board meeting, this building audit is one of our committee's top priorities. As Beth pointed out, it really is a key measure highlighted in our climate roadmap. There was some information here that comes as a surprise to me, and I know it comes as a surprise to some of the other committee members, given their understanding and involvement in this long investment grade audit energy services company energy management services process over the last couple years. So I think it's, unfortunately, we only got the presentation today and only had this opportunity at the select board meeting. I think it would be great for us to be able to talk with Beth at a clean energy and sustainability committee meeting, because I think we have some questions both on the framing of the climate roadmap as well as the terms of the investment of the building audit. For example, there was some concern expressed by some of our committee members about the difference between that preliminary audit and the investment grade audit, and what information is included in each, and what decisions have to be made after that first round. And it seemed like at least some of our committee members expected us to have more information included in order to then have to make a decision and to say go, no go, or to choose what projects, and to have to express what amount of cost or spend or debt we would have an appetite for. So there's some confusion on our committee in terms of, again, process and information to be available and what our decision points would be. So again, that way it's just unfortunate that we are hearing this level of detail and this type of status update at this time. So again, we would appreciate some more ability to ask some questions, and I'm sure we'll have a few more tonight, but I did just want to put that out in an initial point, because we did have some members who have been involved and worked with Beth, over at the beginning, and we've been trying to stay involved, but maybe we haven't been involved as I think we maybe should have been, in order to have a higher level of comfort and to be able to give you our opinion about this. So I don't think we're there yet. Now, we do have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. We'll certainly discuss this. But in the meantime, I'll now ask other committee members to share maybe some specific questions or comments about this presentation.
Yeah, I think I'll say, just in response to that, Mike, the direction that Beth has gotten is sort of, so far, and we can change it, absolutely, is we would like there to be a very clear track of what's going to happen, and we would like that track to have the opportunity to bring a decision before town meeting. So we're trying trying to get everything lined up against that. If we find that we're just not ready in terms of information, and it's going to take us another meeting to digest the information from Amoresco, I mean, we're not going to force fit it if collectively we don't feel like we understand it and can make a decision. But we are eager to try to get back on a track that could have, real progress in the Springtown meeting.
Right, absolutely. Just for one example, it's concerning if some information, may be excluded from a presentation or report out to town management. Given some assumptions, we would just want to be clear what those assumptions are, right? What those framing criteria are. So I appreciate the good, better, best. But really, that's the first time I'm hearing about it. And so we would just want to make sure that it's consistent with our early involvement in this process and consistent with what we were hoping to get out of this particular process.
Yeah, I guess, Beth, I don't know what tomorrow's pretty soon, but I don't know if there's any opportunity for you to allocate some time to the committee tomorrow. Why don't you think about that while you check your date book?
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else from the committee? Yeah, good, Beth.
Yeah, Beth?
Beth Perkins, 9 Patriot Lane. Yeah, I'll reiterate what Mike said, that we really just saw this for the first time. This is a lot of new information to absorb in a few hours, so we really feel like we need time to exchange information between ourselves. But I had a couple of specific questions. So one of our big concerns would be when we get the preliminary audit, how detailed that information would be, and specifically, would the consideration of all the federal and state incentive programs be provided at that point? So at that point, would we know that the price of the cost of putting solar on this specific school or replacing a heat pump would include the following federal and state incentives? Because we feel like that is going to make a big difference when we try and figure out which projects we can move forward with. So would that come in the preliminary audit?
Yes, and I would say, it's never 100% precise until you sort of have the project fully developed, right? In terms of on paper. It's fully designed, developed. The utilities are looking at energy savings, and the best way to do that is by doing that detailed audit on that piece. But it will be a target of utility savings. It will be a target of federal incentives that are known to be available. And to the extent there's either ARPA or ESSER money, that really would have to be something coming from the town. Amoresco won't know how much, if any, money from ARPA or ESSER is still available to be used to help support this project. As it pertains to the Inflation Reduction Act and the wonderful new benefit that has been offered, which I spent more time than I thought I'd ever want to on a Zoom with the Treasury Department. And I can tell you that when I got off the Zoom, I was equally as confused about how this direct pay option is going to work for the public sector. The good thing is there's an option. Right. The unfortunate thing is the devil's in the details, and the details aren't out there yet. Right. But we have a pretty good idea if it's going to be assets like geothermal that the town wants to own. Okay. Right. We have a pretty good idea and how it's impacted in tax exempt versus taxable exempt. So yes, Amoresco will have placeholders in there, which will be offsets to direct cost.
Right, and that kind of relates to another question on the PPO, because when you were outlining what suggestions would be brought forward for renewable energy, it was that Amoresco would be providing us with a PPO, and we were believing that based on the new tax incentives, we might want to at least consider direct ownership, and that should be something that would be part of the equation, because we now can get direct tax credits from the federal government.
And we can certainly have Amoresco provide that as an option and one that's separated out. I welcome an opportunity to, at another meeting, because I know you folks have a long agenda tonight, but to share with you some of the nuances of that direct pay option. Again, it's a great option to have, but understanding the nuances in terms of when the money comes, in terms of the impact it has on tax-exempt borrowing, because there is an impact, there's a reduction in the benefit you get if you use tax-exempt debt. There's some other provisions that make what sounds on paper to be great just a little bit more complicated. I mean, they even encourage public and not-for-profit entities to engage tax counsel to advise you, because it's a taxable thing that's being imported into the tax-exempt world. So it's a little complicated, but all doable. And yes, we will be looking at that.
Okay, just one more question. Because again, the big trick is between this preliminary analysis that we're going to get and then the more, detailed investment grade audit. Is there any limit in the contract as to the number of projects that we can put forward for the full investment grade audit? I know there were people on our committee, people with ESCO experience, that believed that any of the measures recommended should be, given that amount of study. But is there a limitation in the contract as to how much we can ask for in terms of a thorough investment grade audit?
So there's no specific limitation in the contract. But what I will, going back to the example that I had given earlier, if you're specifying a natural gas boiler, you want the design scope for that natural gas boiler that's going to be replaced and the associated savings and real cost information, because they've gone out to bid and they have actual contractor pricing. They're not in the investment grade audit going to do that level of design engineering for that solution and similarly for an all-electric solution.
Okay.
Because everything that follows from there is going to be different. So they would literally have to provide you with 2 fully developed investment grade audits, one for the good, however you define it, and one for the better. And so what they're saying is, we're going to give you at a much higher level good and better with target savings, with a general discussion on scope. So you have a good idea of what it is they're proposing. And from there, we want to marry that all with whatever constraints you all put on the project. Because, as you know, this is a big construction project. They will build as big as you will allow them to build, right? That's where they make their money, in the construction. And so they would be delighted to build a larger scale project for you. But they're trying to have you help them constrain it to something that's financeable and achievable and one that the town can support. And so that's where that level of detail would lie.
Thank you.
Let me just ask my colleagues, I think the main question before us, I think, is do we want to, I guess we'll coordinate with Beth and with Amoresco, but either in the August meeting or in the first September meeting, do we want them to come and give us a first look at those preliminary plans? We can have lots of questions. We can ask them to go back and do it again. But it seems like we at least want that, at least I'm interested in that first batch of information. That may be the only decision tonight is, do we go ahead and ask them to come and present their first cut, either August 15th or September 9th, or whatever the first meeting in September is?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, if they are committing to a mid-August deadline, then yes, I want them in here in August or September, to be honest with you, because quite frankly, they don't have a really good track record with us in meeting their deadlines. So if that's what they are committing to, and that's what Beth says they're committing to, then yeah, I want them in here so that we can see it. And I'll also say, based on comments that Beth and Mike and I had the same comment also, any preliminary audit report that they're going to give us, I do not want 4 hours before our meeting. I mean, I want that in a sufficient amount of time so that all of us can take a look at it, can review it, and come forward with any questions that we have. So, if it's whatever meeting it is, I mean, quite frankly, I think we should have their report at least a week in advance.
Okay, fair. Does that make sense to you, Mike?
Yes, that sounds good, thank you. And I'd like to just check if there's other comments, questions from our committee members.
Sure.
If that's okay.
There's one out,
Yep, there's one online.
there's one online.
But we'll defer to the committee first as they're.
Yep, Erica?
Thank you, Beth, for a terrific presentation. And it's very informative, and I'm so glad that we're going to be able to rely on you for your expertise and all your time with the Treasury Department, et cetera. Could you just talk a little bit about the level of obligation associated with the decisions that we have to make associated with the preliminary report? For instance, I mean, if they work on that report then and bring that to us in January, are we obligated to go with the recommendations they provided, or are we allowed to discuss it, tweak it, put caveats, et cetera?
Yeah, I think as I said in my slide deck, they're going to present to you. So once you get through the preliminary and you have sort of their focus on what you're looking to do, again, you know, whatever that good is and whatever the better is, there may be something in between. They'll develop the full IGA. You will do a review of the IGA. There at that time may be some tweaking around the edges, for sure, with respect to a bunch of different things, with respect to the scope, with respect to maybe the measurement and verification plan and some other things before you move toward a contract. So yes, there'll be the ability to do some tweaking around the edges, but likely at that point, it's not going to be significant wholesale change to the IGA. Once you get the document and you get the project, you might decide we don't want to proceed. This is a great little roadmap for us. We don't want to proceed. We're going to keep your report. We're going to pay you the breakup fee, which had been approved at a prior town meeting, and then you would self-implement. It is not likely that if you were to engage a different energy services company, they would take Amoresco's report and use it. Because when you're guaranteeing savings, you need to have been deeply involved in and understand all of the elements behind those calculations. So I've never seen that adoption, but the town could use the report at its, you know, however you want.
Sure. I guess what I'm really wondering about isn't really the wholesale of all or nothing, but would we be able to say, okay, now that you've done 30% design, it turns out that it's a lot more expensive than you expected in the preliminary, or it has some unexpected consequences than you presented in the Can we sever a piece of it, right? Can we do that level as well? Or even at our whim? I mean, what's our level of obligation?
So if you severed a piece such as that, they would go back and say, okay, great, we'll take this out of the project. Well, we now need to look at the other projects that interacted with that one and potentially make adjustments to the savings. Costs will stay the same, but the savings may change.
Okay.
So for an example, you don't replace a gas boiler, right? So you leave the existing gas boiler in place. All of the savings associated with weatherization and controls and those kinds of things will likely be greater because you're going to be using more energy, right?
Yeah.
So they'll make those adjustments, but yes, you'll have the ability to do that.
Okay, and then one other point is, so the January, if it's the end of January, and I mean, it seems tight if we're going to be presenting it to all those boards, and all those boards have an ability to comment, and we have to come to consensus. I'm not sure that can make it. I don't know, you guys know better, but can that make it?
I think that's probably a question for us, and if we get there and we're not ready, then we won't be ready.
Okay.
So we're not signing up for some runaway train. If we get to January and we need a lot more review and input.
Agreed. I'm just wondering if it's even possible to get something at the end of January and get through all those boards and have everybody say yes. I don't know if that's even possible.
I was actually suggesting that you would get the full IGA by in December. Let's say by the end of December, and that the town boards would work through the review and the discussion and the negotiation and everything we need to do to get to here's what we want to do by the end of January, in time to be able to put either a placeholder or an article, if desired, on the town meeting warrant.
I'm so sorry. You did say that in your charts, and I got it wrong. No, you're right. You did say that in the charts. I'm sorry. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Other questions, Mike?
From One Primrose, so thank you for inviting us, and thank you, Beth, for presenting. I have a little bit of a technical question here. So you did mention about good and better, and you several times mentioned about the gas boiler as well. So I mean, the understanding, I would say common understanding would be, if we go for a new gas boiler with a better energy efficiency, that would qualify for something like a good. And if we go for a heat pump, that will qualify for better.
Potentially, if that is the goal of the community. Again, the way I look at it is good focuses on energy savings. I was using that as an example. Better also focuses on energy savings, but provides a better path forward to more greenhouse gas reductions. So it may be more of an electrification solution or something other, something else that gets greater levels of emissions reductions.
Absolutely, because good can also be that we do a heat pump, and better can be a geothermal as well, right? So I mean, we have to qualify that piece of the technicality as well. The second is, when they come up with the report, would they tell us that if we do good, then how much far away we are from net zero, and if we do better, how much far away are we? So if we do better, are we 50% walking the steps, and if we do good, we are 90% there, but still there is some gap which we have to progress in future years. And I don't know what is best here, but I'll keep it at that.
So good, for good and better, they will give you energy savings in units of energy, energy cost reductions based on current cost of energy, and then the associated greenhouse gas reductions. And so when I'm having them goal seek, I'm having them, so on the good, I'm constraining them to limit the town's requirement of potentially doing a debt exclusion, right? Get as much energy savings as you can to pay for the cost. And for better, my thought is use the good, but expand it to better to improve on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, right? So maybe you're swapping out some technology to get you better greenhouse gas emission reductions without compromising energy savings. And that will swap out projects. Projects that would have been done under good likely won't be, because they'll be replacement projects under better.
That clarifies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Sue Thomas, who is our sustainability coordinator, and then we have 2 written questions from.
Great, let's hear from
How
Sue.
you want
Can we promote Sue, or?
She is promoted. So.
Oh, okay. Hi, Sue.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
As I'm listening, it's occurring to me that I'm wondering if the ESCO model is incompatible with the best scenario, because the best scenario allows the town to capture the ownership and the maximum amount of tax credits. And I've been sitting in those same Treasury webinars with you. So I understand that it's still to be determined in a lot of ways. However, the ESCO 20-year model based on energy savings seems most compatible, whereas capturing the full tax credit advantage requires a longer time frame. So when the town is considering a 20-year contract with an ESCO, I'm trying to weigh, as you're talking about this, whether we're better off doing the best scenario on our own and working with the ESCO on the good or better, and taking a 2-pronged approach, because I'm not sure the ESCO is currently structured where the town reaps those benefits as opposed to the ESCO. Can you sort of address that?
Sure, I think that's a really good question. So the benefits I think you're talking about is the direct pay option. Is that correct, Sue?
Absolutely, yes.
So the direct pay is instead, just for folks who are not familiar with this, the Inflation Reduction Act changed several things as it pertains to investment tax credits and production tax credits. Because they're tax credits, not-for-profits and public entities aren't able to realize the benefit directly prior to the IRA, because you're not taxable entities, you don't pay taxes. But what the law does now is it makes what otherwise would have been available to the taxable entity available to the non-taxable entity in the way of a direct pay or like a cash grant. It's in essence a rebate, a refund, a tax refund. To the extent the town is interested in owning renewable generating assets as opposed to doing it under third party, Ameresco's fine with that. They don't have an issue with that. But then a good portion of capital that perhaps you might have spent on building infrastructure is going to be, even with the credit you're getting, would be embedded in your project. Under a power purchase agreement where they own it, they're going to realize those benefits directly and share in that benefit back with you in the form of a lower rate for the electricity that they produce. Which is not to say that you might decide, the community may decide, we want to own the renewable generating assets. So, a power purchase agreement for renewable generation is nothing more than, the other term is, which you may be familiar with, so is energy as a service, right? They're putting in stuff and they're charging you for the energy. They could do that for heat. They could do that with a big geothermal system. They could do it with anything. Right now, what's typically been sort of the typical project opportunities in the Commonwealth is for solar generation to be contracted, owned by a third party who historically could realize benefits that the public sector couldn't take advantage of, but now can. So if that's the constraint, if that's the directive, if the town wants to own it, and I'm happy to have a really long conversation about how I feel about that, having been involved in several dozen large-scale projects with municipalities that are third-party owned, and the pay-for-performance option versus the having you responsible for the asset issue. But I don't have a position either way. Just happy to share my thoughts on it. So yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that another piece of a benefit that that I've been working on for several years and haven't yet integrated into performance contracts, and Westford may be the first one I attempt to do that, is there's another tax benefit, but it's less of a tax credit, it's more of a tax deduction. And it's a section of the IRS code that allows the design engineer, so it could be if you did a 149 project, the design engineer is probably taking this benefit without you even knowing it, and the ESCOs are taking the benefit. There is a deduction that they're able to realize that you never will be able to. And so how do we integrate that extra benefit into the project in a way that benefits the community? And of course, I have some ideas how we're going to do that, and we'll push for that in any contract that the town enters into with Ameresco. But I hear you completely. It's a new mousetrap. As for whether the best approach can really be implemented under a performance contract, it depends on that constraint. You can implement anything under a performance contract under state law that saves energy or water and improves energy utilization in your buildings and also provides renewable solutions. The constraint that you have under state law is that you can't contract for a period more than 20 years. That's what's codified in state law right now. Yep. So if you're trying to constrain the project and goal seek for a project that can be paid for 100% from savings, there's going to be a capital constraint.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have plenty of opportunities to discuss this. So I'm willing to, Beth, Sue, if you have one more short question, that's fine. I know we've got 2 questions online, so I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity, a lot more to explore, many more conversations to have. So Sue, if you've got one more follow-on, then please go ahead.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak further later, Beth. Thank you so much.
Okay, super.
So we have 2 questions from Paul Morse. I'm going to state them both at the same time. Could you clarify the applicability of the debt exclusion requirement for the 2 options that have been presented? And will Ameresco consider integrated solutions across near neighbor buildings, such as the town center complex, For example, common electrical microgrid, common solar field, common geothermal capabilities.
So let me address the first one. Again, a debt exclusion or cash from heaven, whatever it takes to bring sufficient funds to pay for the cost of the project, will likely be necessary under a better solution. Because we're only I'm constraining the good solution to not require a debt exclusion, which means all of the savings from the project will be sufficient to offset the cost of the project, inclusive of all funds available by getting into the flow of stream of money, right? So we're gonna use everything to bring down the cost, and the debt service will be met by the energy savings. That's what I'm pushing Amoresco to put together for the good solution.
Yep.
For the better solution, as I mentioned, there will be more costs than there will be savings, because we're pushing toward a cleaner ultimate solution other than just energy savings and potentially some renewable generation. So, and so that's the issue of the debt exclusion.
Yeah,
As for,
Go ahead, Beth. Do you know offhand, can you respond to his question, or is that something we'll need to follow up with more detail in terms of what's in scope for Amoresco in terms of microgrid, et cetera?
The integrated solutions
Yeah,
across.
I'm just, for the second part of the question, I'm trying to move to a wrap up of this section of the meeting, Beth. So is this something we should get back to Paul with, or do you feel like we can give him a quick answer?
I don't think that's a quick answer. I think again, it would be based on all the conversations that you've had so far to date, and whether that, it's a great solution theoretically. I don't know how practical it is for the buildings. So I maybe.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. I think we're at a good place to press pause here. We will either have Amoresco come back on the 15th of the following meeting. We'll accept the constraint that we need the report to analyze a week ahead of time, so that may push into the second slot. And I hope that we're able to coordinate some time between the committee and Beth for further question and
That would
answer.
be great for us to be able to talk and be more prepared and comfortable before your next meeting. We would appreciate that. So
Okay.
we'll work with Beth and Eric and others on that. We would appreciate that.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Not seeing any, then we can adjourn our committee meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks, Beth.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, 7:45 item is continuation of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding requests. So I think we're coming back, Kristen, to look at a couple of the things we talked about and want to give the board a little bit more background.
Yes, so thank you. I also have Health Director Ray Dick here in the room in case there's specific questions about her ask, but I will present all three matters, which include the townwide strategic plan request, the land use master plan request, and the health department's community health assessment, community health improvement plan. Before I have Eric bring up the presentation, I did just want to remind the board of where we are in terms of the ARPA funds. So I'm just going to bring that up on my screen quickly. We have to date on account and available to spend and allocate before December of 2024, $479,459. So that amount has not been allocated. Throughout the presentation this evening, I'll be talking about a strategic plan that has been estimated at $95,000, a land use master plan that has been estimated at $175,000, and a community health assessment that's been requested for $75,000. So if all three of those projects are approved and allocated this evening, we would have a balance of $134,459 on account. If there's a combination of that, I can certainly do the quick math throughout the presentation this evening. So just wanted to set that stage related to available ARPA fundings before we get into the presentation. So Eric, if you could bring up the slideshow, that would be great. And you can, so what I want to talk about tonight is the existing guiding documents that the town of Westford has, and how a strategic plan, a land use master plan, and or a comprehensive community health assessment would fit into the plans that we already have. So Eric, next slide, please. So the town of Westford has created many guiding documents over the course of the past few years related to different functions of the government throughout the course of time. So the next slide. So this is a little bit difficult to read on the screen. The board members also have a memorandum, and there's a memorandum in the packet. The top in blue is a town-wide strategic plan. We do not have that. That's what I'm currently asking for. This would be the overall guiding document that directs where the town would be going in a 10 to 30 year fashion, whatever the board decides upon. Any other plan that the town or the board or other boards and commissions create would sit under that strategic plan and inform up to that strategic plan. So on the far left-hand side, we do have a comprehensive land use master plan that was created in 2009. The economic development section, I believe, was updated in 2018. We know a lot has changed since 2018 with the pandemic. Falling under that comprehensive land use master plan, we have an open space and recreation plan that is valid through August of 2025. We have a housing production plan that was recently adopted and is valid until 2026. We have a hazard mitigation plan valid through 2028. We have a municipal vulnerability preparedness plan, which we just received the tree and invasive species plan out of in 2023. We have our economic development self-assessment, the EDSAT, in 2025, a sidewalk master plan from 2000, which is quite outdated, and a Route 110 master plan from 1999. So all of those plans converge under what I consider the comprehensive land use plan. Moving from left to right, in the green category, we have a climate action roadmap that was prepared in the version 2.0, prepared in 2022, but adopted in 2023. We have a comprehensive emergency management plan that was prepared in 2021. We have a water system master plan that was prepared in 2018. A stormwater management master plan that was prepared in 2016. What you see under the next section is a town-wide facility condition assessment. So this was created in 2015. That was a very broad brush document. What the board did allow for is a space and facilities assessment that is currently under development. We're creating the request for proposals right now and anticipate bringing that to you at your August meeting. We have an ADA self-assessment evaluation that is quite old, from 1994. We did receive funding from the state to redo that in 2022, 2023. However, did not receive any bids, so we'll be going back out for grant funding for the next round. And then we have the Westford Public Schools Master Plan that was just created in May of 2023. The next category is the library strategic plan. So the library has a strategic plan for those functions, valid 2023 to 2025. We have a community health assessment that would fit under the strategic plan that is to be determined as under your consideration for this evening. And then a recreation master plan that was created in 2016. And under that sits a recreation and aquatic center feasibility study that was created in 2022. So this is what I've gathered over the course of time. I may miss a document here or there, but with input from the department heads, these are the current guiding documents that Westford has and the anticipated documents that could be created over time to lead the success for the town into the future. Next slide, please. So I'll move into a series of slides. One, what is a strategic plan, then what is a land use master plan, and then what is a community health assessment, to give the board and the public those overviews and how they would link together. So why a strategic plan? This is a little bit different than what I believe the board has done in the past. And this is how we can improve the town as an organization and really take it to the next level of government. We wouldn't know how to move forward unless we engage the public, our boards and commissions, in a fashion, in a strategic way. And we would also want to be comparing ourselves to others. How do we want to do better, do well, really stand out as an excellent government within the municipality? Next slide, please. So also, why are we planning to plan to plan to plan? I know this board has been asking those questions a lot. If we don't have a plan, and then how do we actually get to implementation? So we need to know where we're at today. We need to set benchmarks of where we are in terms of population, demographics, budget-wise. Then we need to set a vision. Where do we want to be in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? And then we need to set that plan of how are we going to get there? And then eventually, if we do create a strategic plan, our budget would align with these goals of how to get there, and we would get there over the course of time. Next slide, please. So some of you may be familiar with kind of a mission statement, a vision statement, goals and tasks from your professional careers or other areas of your work, or if you sit on other boards and commissions, but it's not often that municipalities create a mission for themselves, a vision, a goal, and then a task, but it's really important to how the organization would lead into the future, use their budgetary items to the best of their ability, and also help the employees drive to those visions of the community and the select board. So I'm not going to read all of these out loud. You've had this presentation for a few days, but just wanted to reiterate that a strategic plan would help us really soak in a mission. We'd have a vision for our employees to carry out that mission. We'd set goals as departments and employees, and then those would be carried down to the task level with the employees would carry that out. But it would all be based upon how the community sees itself today and into the future. So next slide. So really, this also leads into what I had just stated, that we want the residents to really set the tone of what are our organizational goals. Then the select board would determine the strategic goals of the municipality. I, as town manager, would help implement those tactical goals on the department level with the department heads, and then all of the divisions would go towards those operational goals. And again, it would be informed by the mission and vision and the desired outcomes of the community. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of creates when we would be moving forward with a strategic plan if the board so chooses, and how it would integrate other plans and data. So we would potentially choose a consultant that would review all of the relevant plans as data collection, the plans that were in the first slide in the Gantt chart, as well as others that come about. This data would be referenced in tests. Some of the data is old, some of it may have changed. And then the strategic plan would inform the specific plans that may need to be updated. This is just an example of the health assessment, that the assessment could start in tandem with the strategic planning process, and the data could be used across both plans by various departments and organizations. So next slide, Eric. So I wanted to give the board and the community some examples of strategic plans that have been done not only within Massachusetts, but within the nation. So these are just two examples. The town of Westboro, which actually the budget task force is really leaning towards Westboro as one of our benchmark communities. And then also I'm using Bothell, Washington. I actually visited this city 2 years ago and have kind of been hooked at what the work that they're doing related to strategic visioning and moving forward related to their budgeting. In the memorandum I provided you, there's probably about 10 more strategic plans that you could reference and review, and they all have a little bit of twist and nuance based upon what that community's vision was and the form of government that they had. So before I move on to land use master plan, Eric, if you could just go back to that sample strategic plan slide, are there any questions that the board wants to ask now related to the strategic plan, or would you like me to continue on?
What do you think? Would you rather come back and ask all the questions together? Okay, why don't we proceed?
Sure.
Thanks.
So next slide, Eric, please. So the next is why a land use master plan. So the last comprehensive land use master plan for Westford was in 2009. Land use master plans are generally valid for 10 years. This is a guiding document based upon Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 4181D. And in the master plan that the town of Westford created in 2009, it actually went beyond the boundaries that are actually required. And it was a very, very comprehensive document. The master plans provide public policy and decision making primarily towards land use, economic development, housing, services and facilities, and natural resources. At this time, there's always an opportunity for community members to discuss the priorities for those items, reach consensus on goals, and then identify strategies for achieving those goals. In the state law, they actually further state that the master plan is to provide a basis for decision making regarding long-term physical development within your municipality. So I think the plan that you have had in place since 2009 has served the town very well, but there are a lot of things that have changed over time and other items that might inform a new land use master plan. So next slide, Eric. So how would the master plan of 2023 or 2024 or 2025 inform or compare to the 2009 version? It would provide an updated content and relevancy to the current state of the town. It would incorporate plans and guiding documents that were created since 2009, and it would allow for voices to be heard that may have not participated in 2009 or participated moving forward. The question is, when would we actually do this? When will we have capacity? How would we go about this? I think what I've heard from the land use department and from the board is that this MBTA communities zoning work is really priority, and that a land use master plan would really be informed from the work that we're doing related to the MBTA communities work. I also think the land use master plan could commence after or during the final stages of the townwide strategic plan. In my vision, the strategic plan would inform us of how we would want to use our land in the future related to development or conservation or preservation. And this information would help guide the land use master planning process. So next slide. So again, I wanted to give you some examples of land use master plans. In your memo, there are many, many more, but two that stood out to myself as well as the land use department were the city of Beverly and the Massachusetts and the town of Exeter, New Hampshire, related to their readability, how communities were engaged in the process, and then the outcomes and the goals of those items. So finally, we'll move on to the community health assessment and community health improvement plan. And again, I have Ray in the room in case there's any specific questions that I can't answer related to that. So why a community health assessment and improvement plan? And many of the questions have been, well, we did some sort of plan with the school and safety task force. How would this link in? How would it link into the youth surveys that are done through the schools? How would it link in through the outreach that we're doing with the senior center and the like? This type of plan would assess the current health status of Westford residents, not only physical health, but mental health. It would determine factors contributing to disparities of health among certain residents of our town. It would assess organizations and residents' perspectives concerning conditions in Westford that might promote health or might diminish health of our residents. It could be It could be assessing assets or resources that we could have or leverage related to health of our residents. And it could also address what are the top health concerns of our residents and how do we address that moving forward. And it provides the community a source of data and information in addition to the data and information that we have now that the Board of Health, the Health Department, the Select Board, and others could use in terms of program development, policy changes, and perhaps grant funding applications. Next slide, please. This just goes on to state what other things would be in the assessment: the comprehensive analysis, health issues, behavioral factors, socioeconomic characteristics, and so on. And finally, it would develop a comprehensive collaborative process around community organizations, health providers, and community groups. Next slide, please. What is not being asked tonight, but I want to just make sure that it is included in the discussion, is a community health assessment usually leads to a community health improvement plan and how we would move forward to provide those services or opportunities for the residents of Westford on a systematic process and strategies moving forward, so the health department has benchmarks and methods moving forward. Next slide, please. So again, this is just a little bit of an example of how would the assessment overlap with other plans and data, such as the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey. So this just covers a certain set of the population. The assessment would cover the entire population on a broad number of topics and would incorporate the data that we've collected from the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey. Again, this is when would the health assessment start? It could be in tandem with a strategic plan. Ray's informed me that the consultant that they are looking at could start actually as early as the middle of to end of August, but that would be all dependent upon funding and strategy. So next slide, please. So the next is a sample of community health assessments. I used just Massachusetts examples here. Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is of course a much larger city and has much larger makeup than the town of Westford. And then the Central Massachusetts Public Health Alliance, in which I was involved in this organization in this health assessment. So just wanted to give that. That includes 5 communities in Central Massachusetts, including Worcester, but other much smaller communities than Westford. And then just take any questions and discussions related to that. Just wanted to remind the board that the strategic plan perhaps could be about $95,000 based upon estimates we received back in May. A land use master plan around $175,000, and then the health department is asking for the community health assessment at $75,000.
And as all ARPA things, it's been a bit of a process where we sometimes decide we've heard enough and we're convinced we're ready to move forward. Sometimes we raise new questions that we feel like we need to understand more about before we can make a decision. So I guess to you, are there any that you are feeling kind of a solidification around the need and the understanding of what it is? Are there questions that we have for one or several of these that we really need to understand better before we can move towards saying yes or no?
Before we get to that, first of all, thank you for this really comprehensive explanation and sort of delineating what each of the plans is intended to do and to accomplish. I very much appreciate it, since I had lots of questions about that. All that being said, I guess I still see ways in which these plans interact with each other and overlap with each other. So if you take the strategic plan, it seems to me if we're going to do that, that's the first one that gets done, and that from that plan, actually, we will get a lot of information, I think, that can be used for the master plan land use, and also can particularly be used for the health assessment. So for example, I mean, one of the things that you said that the health assessment's supposed to do is, is to ask the community what health services they want. If the strategic plan is supposed to be, to involve the community and get their input and what they see moving forward, I don't know, why can't that be a question that's part of the strategic plan? Why do I need a separate health assessment to ask that question? I don't think I do. And so I think that there's overlap with that. I think there's overlap with the land use management plan, that if we had that information coming out of the strategic plan, that could be used, and that might actually also decrease the cost of that plan, because we have that information already and the consultant doesn't need to go and do that. And the same thing with the health assessment. If we decide to do that, it decreases all of those costs. So I'm still seeing overlap and integration between these plans, and I'm still not convinced that we need to spend $345,000, which only leaves us of a balance of about $134,500. And the other thing that's coming into my thinking about that balance is actually based upon what we just heard from Beth and Amoresco, which is that depending on what we go forward with, good, better projects that we may want to do under Amoresco, should we be reserving ARPA funds if we want to go forward with some of those funds? So
and there's other constraints that the budget task force is coming up with as well that might lead to that.
So I'm very cautious at this point. We only have about $500,000 left, and I want to make sure that we spend less than that, actually, $479,000. So I really want to make sure that these last funds that we spend, we're doing it in a way that we get the most for our buck, that's the most efficient, cost efficient, and also serves the town the best way. So that's what I'm struggling with tonight. So
I think it's an excellent point that by staging them, you more or less guarantee that they're going to be integrated in a way that if you're trying to do a whole lot of things at once, they can't be integrated. So that's a really interesting point. Other Scott?
I mean, to me, the most vital one is the land use master plan. I mean, we do them every 10 years. I have to look out there and say, I was part of the implementation for the last one, which was 10 years ago. I look at Route 110 and say, is the highest and best use of that road being met? No. For tax benefits, heck no. So I think we really want to do that. We've actually under town meeting mandate to look at Route 40, which kind of falls in that land use plan as well. So to me, that I think is a must. Maybe not it's first out of the gate because of timing with our planning staff, but that to me seems to be important. And I was kind of on the fence with the strategic plan. I guess two things happened. One is I looked at Westboro's because Shrewsbury's I thought was kind of fluffy for the money. No offense to your former employer, but
Totally fine.
but Westboro seemed actually really quite good. Because where are you today? What do you like about this town? What needs to change? But then where do you see yourself in 10 years? Are you still here? Are you here because your kids are here for school? Are you here because of other things that you'll want to be here for until the day you die, potentially? Do they ask questions that we don't actually ask normally as part of our, but yeah, would determine how we want to spend money and plan long-term. So that was one thing that struck me. And secondly was I've been part of the charrette for the Graniteville development, thoughts. That 90 minutes or so of focused discussion with a moderator, if you will. I thought we got more done in 90 minutes than we had gotten done in 3 years of task force meetings because it was focused by somebody who knew how to focus attention and get content. So if there was a way to sort of guarantee that we had a consultant who would get the employees in focus groups and get that kind of input and get a good citizen, probably multiple citizen meetings, perhaps you're meeting at the various church groups or the garden groups and the women, Westford moms, all those various groups, and get those opinions. I think that could be worth doing. How they fit together, timing-wise, is still in the details. But I've kind of come around a little more that strategic plan to me makes some sense. And especially in the case of Westboro, it was done with the new town manager. So it was a chance to take a look at just overall town direction from a leadership standpoint as well as budget standpoint.
Thanks, Scott. John, did I see your hand earlier?
Yes. I'd like to get an understanding of the urgency of this. I'd like to wait and see what the budget task force comes up with, where needs are going to be. I'd also like to see the funds that we have left spent on supporting the people of the town doing something that we can accomplish in the next year or so. I'm not convinced that planning everything is the way to use these funds. The comprehensive plan covered everything. It does need to be updated, but I'm not convinced of the urgency at this point when we've got so many other things that are happening. And I'd like to wait to make a decision until we get through with the budget task force and understand just where we are and the money situations going forward.
It's an excellent point. Maybe there's a question there too. Is there anything, Kristen, that you think is particularly urgent about these three, or do you feel like we've got, if we came back to it next week and a month after the budget task force report, is there anything that would say we're under some sort of time constraint, or do you feel like the window is open for us to get that input?
It's certainly at the pleasure of the board. A strategic plan helps the board and myself and the community set goals for the future. We could certainly do that just as ourselves, as you've done in the past. That's a certain method. The land use master plan, obviously we've heard the direction from town meeting, so I think it's how the board would like to consider this. We have until about October 1st through 15th to hear from the budget task force about those constraints. We'll hear more from Amoresco and the others and anything else that might come in. So obviously it's good practice to have goals and set standards and move forward and get community feedback. I know that we're really looking for how to get the community involved, so that would be one of the processes of a strategic plan, but it's the pleasure of the board, really, what direction you'd like to go in.
One question. So I know we had discussed using ARPA money to fund a consultant for economic development, which seems to go hand in hand with some of this planning. Where does that stand? I know it's off topic a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So the board did fund $95,000 to fund a part-time economic development consultant. And I met with the land use department and 2 members of the economic development committee last week to start developing that request for proposal. We're going to meet again next week or the week after to firm that up and hopefully have that out for bid by September to get bids back and look at that to hopefully start by January 1st with that consultant.
Thanks. Yeah, my reactions are very similar to Scott. So I feel like we're always doing our very best to interpret the needs and wishes of the residents, but we don't have very much data to do that with. And we have our own anecdotal experience. We have all the work we do with committees. But I'm not convinced it seems very healthy on some regular interval to do something as thorough and thoughtful as the Westboro Town Study, because I would just love to have that true information. So when we're making decisions about allocations, we're just that much more sure we're meeting the needs and goals of the residents. And it does feel like we're under some mandate to do the updated land use plan at some point. It sounds like we don't need to make an immediate call on that because we can't really address it anyway, given the work in the planning department. So I think incrementally I'm feeling more that we'd get a lot of value and some really essential value from the strategic plan. I feel like we can maybe wait and hover a little bit since we can't start the work anyway in the land use plan. And I find the data that's buried in like the second half of the Cambridge plan with the very specific health stuff, I find that really compelling, but I feel like I'm also wanting to see how that balances against everything else we're looking at, because that's, I think it's really important, useful data to have, but I feel like we've got a lot of other inputs coming in that would help me know whether that fits the top priority or the second priority or the third. Chris?
Yeah, questions. So it was my recollection, I thought, did we already approve ARPA funding for the website redesign?
Yes.
We did that, and we did that for the facilities master plan.
Yes.
Right. So, my feeling is, like you two have said, I believe we need input from the townspeople. So my desire to see a strategic plan is still pretty strong. As to whether or not we authorize funding for it today versus wait to hear what the budget task force comes back with, I'm fine with waiting. I don't think a few months is going to make a huge difference. I do have a question about the facilities master plan, though. Just reading your memo.
The one we,
I know we already
one
approved
we
it.
approved, or-
Yeah, we already approved it. But I just, the scope of work, I was surprised at the selection of the buildings and maybe the exclusion of certain buildings. Maybe I missed that. That was what was proposed earlier. But can you just quickly speak to why we're like leaving out the fire department buildings and other town buildings?
Sure. So we are leaving out the library for obvious reasons. We're leaving out the main fire station because that was constructed and opened in, I believe, 2018. We're leaving out NAB and Rogers because that will be reviewed under the NAB-NASIT designer selection that's ongoing right now. So those were the reasons. I can bring up the memo certainly on the other buildings, or if you have it in front of you and want to.
Well, you have East Boston camps are excluding, Parkerville Schoolhouse, which we've had to repair multiple times in the past. The museum we've done funding for.
Yes. So those are really spaces that are not hosting municipal employees. So I think the goal was to look at spaces that were hosting municipal employees and those space utilization needs at that time.
So are you thinking this is more of a space utilization study or the condition of the facilities and how much it's going to cost to keep them and maintain them over
so
time?
the primary purpose is the space utilization and how the employees use them and how we can plan for the future with the growth of the town of Westford to accommodate the needs of the town government. Supplementally, we will be asking for an assessment of the capital conditions, but we're also seeing that as part of the Amoresco study as well. So I'm working very closely with the facilities department and the assistant town manager on how to carefully craft that language, and we hope to have the draft RFP to the board by August 15th for the review and consideration before that goes out to bid. So we will not be issuing that without consideration from the select board and from the permanent town building committee.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, a couple of things. I noticed that the police station was listed in one and the police building was also included in the other. I share Chris's concern in that if you're going to do a space consideration of where employees are, you should you may need to include more than just the ones that you considered, because some facilities may not be fully occupied. If some of the new ones may have more room. So when you're talking about space utilization, I think they would be included. But I thought the police were listed there twice, one excluded and one not. And just one other minor point. I work on a comprehensive master plan, and it was more than a comprehensive land use plan. And I think I think that nomenclature should be changed.
I agree.
Maybe what we're looking for is a master land use plan. And I think when we did the implementation review, that came about very loud and clear.
I guess question for the board, so for the facilities plan, which is not what we're actually talking about tonight, do we want to schedule that for a follow-up discussion to have more review about what's in and what's out? I guess maybe I'll just leave that out there. If you'd like to add that as an agenda item, we could certainly do that.
So in the RFP that goes out, it will list
The
Yes.
buildings,
The
yes.
buildings, so-
And you'll have full
We'll have that
review of
chance
that
to do
before
that.
it
I
goes
think we'll
out.
have
Okay,
that
so why don't we
chance to
address
do
it then?
Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you, Andrea. So I think what I'm hearing is, at least among some of us, sort of becoming more convinced that the strategic plan has importance and gives us sort of the bedrock information we need. And then maybe the urgency and prioritization for the other two are later. We could decide that we want to wait until we hear from the Budget Task Force before we do anything. We could decide that we feel compelled enough on the strategic plan to move forward, or we could decide that there's some other information we'd like to finalize our decision. I don't know what the pleasure of the board is. I feel like the kind of information contained in the strategic plan, I think, is important, and we haven't had available, and I don't know, I would prioritize that pretty highly.
I agree. I mean, I think it could give us a lot of good information. I think the key to it is the consultant we hire. Like everything else, I mean, if we want to get kind of the information, Tom, that you're talking about, you know, where are we? What do people want? You know, we need a consultant who really is going to be able to engage with the community and get the community input and get people, you know, and whether it's, you know, through in-person meetings, through, you know, electronic, you know, ways. Not my, you know, I don't know how you do, you know, I don't know how you do that, but what I do know is that if we're going to get a strategic plan that really is worthwhile and really gives us the information that we want, we're going to have, you know, it's really imperative, and I think it's on us, or on, you know, to hire the correct consultant who's done this and who is really capable and able to get that kind of input. So.
I agree. I mean, we just think about schools at the task force. We had a security consultant here out of the park. We had a mental health consultant who didn't. Right. So we've seen what you can do with a good one and not so good one. But I mean, if we had the strategic plan now, he'd probably help us guide the budget task force, right? So I think we do probably want to move forward with it. And the thing I liked about Westboro's was they actually. We advertise things. Okay, it's on our website, and we put up a notice on the library. We call that, you know, kind of public information, or we use WCAP. But they actually were pretty innovative with some of their.
Graphics are amazing.
So yeah, so I liked. I don't know who they have. Well, I know I forgot who they have for consultant, but yeah, that kind of outreach to the community to get that excitement, if you will. That's important to get a useful study.
Well, what we could do is we could ask Kristen to, move forward with a request for proposal. We could ask that she include the consultant, or specifically solicit the consultant that did the Westboro study, and then we could look at those proposals that are coming back from the potential vendors without us making a commitment, but we could ask that those get teed up in front of us. Does that sound like a direction of interest?
Yes, for me.
I just caution, and this is just, a consultant may not wish to respond if they know that funding has not been allocated for the project. So they are always taking these projects as marketing, and it's kind of under the, you know, it's overhead. So I just take that under consideration, that there may be some that may choose not to respond if the town has not appropriated the funds, but that's certainly a risk that we could or couldn't take. And I'm not trying to talk the board into doing something that they're not comfortable with. I just wanted to
It's a
say
good
that
point,
as a
though,
fact.
that you bring it up. We certainly wouldn't want to exclude good candidates.
I was just going to say, we don't want to exclude the A-team because we haven't got funding out there.
So procedurally, what we could do is what I'm thinking is, if we got someone that we felt could give us the kind of result that we saw in the Westboro study, we would want to go ahead. I think sounds like the consensus. So I guess what we could do is go ahead and vote to appropriate the funds, solicit the bids. If we weren't satisfied with any of the people who responded, then we wouldn't award the contract.
Right.
Does that feel like the feeling where we are? In which case we would go ahead and vote to allocate the, I don't know the dollar figure number.
95.
And again, the scope of this would not include a health assessment or anything like that.
No, it would not. It might, the outcome of a strategic plan might say
Understood.
Westford really wants a health assessment, and then we would
And
go
that's what I'm
forward.
looking for from that, is to tell us if health issues are of a particular concern to the town of Westford, then let's go ahead and do the next step. But until we do that, I think let's get that input.
John?
Kristen, what would that strategic plan look like? What's the level of detail that you get out of a strategic plan? The ones I've looked at are very general in nature, kind of goals and things like that.
Yeah, so I did provide about 15 examples in your memo. It's really how the community wants it to outcome. Obviously, we develop a mission for the town of Westford. For the employees, we develop a vision of where we want to be in 10 to 20 years. We would develop key strategic focus areas that the town should be focusing on for the next 10 to 20 years based upon community feedback. And then there would be action items developed out of that then the board and the finance committee and town meeting would be able to fund matters if it's an act of funding, or would be able to drive resources if it's for employees or other boards and commissions towards those action outcomes.
Yeah, the part I found most compelling, John, in some of them was the really detailed resident feedback. That's the part that I thought was gold. Like real strong indications of where people are, where they're going, the kind of support they want to see from the town. That was the stuff that I found, like, I would love to have that for our town when we're making decisions.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion that we appropriate $95,000 to do a strategic plan, a strategic townwide plan.
Second.
All in favor? Chris? I'm sorry.
We should probably ask if there are any comments from the
Oh, yeah.
audience.
Sure.
Well, does this mean we're asking for an RFP? I mean, I guess we appropriate the money, then next step is that Kristen drafts an RFP that we review. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, if there are any comments.
Okay.
Great. All in favor, Chris?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
John?
Nay.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye, and I'm an aye, so it's 4-1. And it sounds like we're going to belay the conversation on the other two until we come back to them at a future meeting. Okay. We are now on to our 10 item, old new business. First is request to open the 2023 special town meeting warrant to be held on Monday, October 16th, 2023 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? John? I saw you're unmuted, but I saw your lips. Aye. Chris?
Aye, yeah.
Andrea?
Aye.
All right.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Next item is to request to approve the 2023 annual reappointments of election officers as listed in the meeting packet.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Chris?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Number 3 is to consider a request from the Economic Development Committee to appoint Sundar Subramanian as a full member for a term expiring June 30, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? I'm going to go in reverse order. Aye.
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Okay, next is review the draft strategic planning retreat agenda. Do we want to go ahead and pull that up? There we go.
So we provided the board and the public with the draft strategic planning retreat agenda for September 7th of this year from 5 to 8 at Kimball Farms. What I also provided in the packet were the agendas from 2019 and 2022 as well, just so you could get a feel for how those two retreats when and how you envision the retreat for 2023 to be. I think based upon conversations that the board has had and input that I've had with department heads is we're leaning towards smaller roundtable discussions based upon 4 particular topics and then exhibit tables on the outskirts. But we wanted to review this with the board as we're, almost a month out, which I can't really believe. And just want to make sure we firm this out so we can get the save the dates out and engage the public and get them to come to the event and participate.
So my question is, 20 minutes for roundtable discussions? It takes people 5 to 7 minutes to move from one table discussion to another one. I don't see this, engendering really a lot of discussion, to be honest, okay?
So we wanted to get the feeling of the board is, do we want people to choose just 2 sessions and spend more time, or do we want them to choose 4 sessions, which I'm hearing, I think 4 sessions is really not doable, so perhaps we pare it down that you choose 2 and you circulate
I think
twice around.
I think that's more doable.
Great.
I
Okay.
think 20 minutes, like I said, it takes people that long, 7 minutes just to get from place to place and say hello to everybody and chit chat and et cetera. Pardon? It's very social.
Does everyone agree? I agree with Andrew, but everyone else agree. The only, so I like this a lot. What it means also, though, is that, so for example, if the Budget Task Force is there are many members of the Budget Task Force, they'll probably have 10 people at a table with 1 member each and go through kind of an initial pitch. There won't be any, I think by design, there won't be any kind of broadcast presentation to everybody. All of that content will be delivered within these 2 working sessions. Is that all?
Well,
Does that feel right?
The other challenge I see is we're assuming that every topic is going to have an equal number of participants.
Right.
Right? So if we have an increase in interest in the Budget Task Force, are they going to have ample room and representation to support all those people in this small group format? Whereas then you might have one picnic table full of people who might be interested in another topic. So I think that balancing act could really bite us. I think this may be just too complex with too many topics to really get the message out, because some of this stuff is very complex and is going to require, I bet, a lot of give and take from audience members to the people giving the presentations and supporting it. I think we're being too ambitious.
I mean, we used to do it this way, and then we went to the sort of broadcast, and frankly, in that environment, people are social at the edges.
They are.
You can't hear a thing, so
Well, I think part of the problem too is size. Like every year it gets bigger and bigger, right?
More and more people come, which is really a good thing.
It's a good thing, but then we have to really rethink the format. Is small group still going to work if 300 people show up this time around?
What's the historical attendance? Anyone know offhand? I don't know.
I think we budgeted between 250 and 300 in terms of
The last
meals.
the last one we had, there were 300 people there.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 2022, I believe there were about 300 people there.
Okay, so if one of these swelled, it could be 100 people or more.
Yeah.
And I think what you'd have to do is make sure that the committees were there in enough force if they're going to split up and host these smaller meetings to be able to accommodate that. We had talked about, the Budget Task Force was saying we'd be able to support maybe 10. So I think if you had 10, you could probably do 10 groups of 10 without it losing too much value. But
10 people at a picnic table plus 1 facilitator, you're thinking? I mean, that's the format we did for the recreation master plan back in the day, and it worked out, but it was, probably, it wasn't 100 people, right? Over 10, it was maybe 60 people.
yeah.
Are we still limited to 1 big tent, or are we?
I believe that is the
yeah.
limitation, yes. So I've heard that you used to have 2 and it was a little bit easier to separate topics and conversations, and now with 1 big tent, it's much harder to hear and focus conversation.
Yes.
Well, I hear you, Chris. I'm trying to think of an alternative besides, making sure people are ready for that kind of volume and planning for it. Is there another?
I mean, we could
another
certainly have
structure?
with an RSVP to have people select the topics. It doesn't mean they're actually going to go to those topics when they get there, because they might want to sit with their neighbors or their family or their friends, or, oh, I changed my mind, or I've learned something new. So it gives you a little bit of understanding of how many people would go to each topic, but it's not a 100% guarantee. I think MBTA communities and the MCMAC is really looking for feedback at the strategic planning forum. I think the budget task forces. I'm not quite sure the water, PFAS, and water rates versus sustainability and building retrofits, if you wanted to cut the topics.
I think those would be the two I would cut.
Me too. Although I do think the PFAS is an important issue, and we've got to get the word out, but maybe not.
Well, I think PFAS, I mean, if I was a private homeowner, I want to know what was going on. I mean,
Well, I bet most of them don't know.
exactly, that's why.
Well, I guess, to go to your point, are we doing too much? And maybe, we
I'm thinking less is more in this situation.
And yes, if we decide not to do PFAS, or maybe we do PFAS, or maybe we don't do the MCMAC?
I think MCMAC is important because
Okay.
we're going to zoning for March of 2023.
Is there, do we hold a separate public, forum for,
Yes, we
PFAS?
could do that, right.
Okay,
And maybe invite people who are
well owners specifically.
yeah.
Okay, so I think we're hearing that we want to have 2 sessions, not 4, and reduce the topic count either to 2 or 3. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think I would go with 2 personally, but
If you've got 2 total, so like 1 and 1, because then you get no small groups anymore. You're looking at speakers again.
Well, you might
Or
just.
you could rotate, like you could go to budget task force for an hour and then switch to the MCMAC table for the next hour. So you could engage in both topics and not have to choose between 4.
Yeah, it sounds almost like you'd be directing half the room to start with one, and then you'd switch halfway through. And I think the way you get the small group experience is by having a lot of people on the committees willing to go and break down into small groups.
so for the MBTA conversation, are there enough facilitators?
I believe there's a consultant with, I think, 3 people on that team, and then the MCMAC committee has 9 members, and there's 3 staff members, so I believe that they
Okay,
could
yeah,
accommodate it.
that's pretty good,
I would
yeah.
want to confirm with land use, but my gut feeling is that they would be able to accommodate it.
That's great.
Okay, that feels like we've got a consensus here. Okay. Do you feel you have what you need?
Yep, so cut to 2 topics, budget task force and MBTA communities. Perhaps we could have a table related to water rates and PFAS and a table related to sustainability, building retrofits, having the opening remarks, then having session 1 for about an hour, session 2 for, I want to gauge the kind of dinner time as well. If we serve dinner in the middle, are people going to leave and not go to the second session, or, what is the board's consensus about that?
I think people usually stick
Yeah,
around.
they stick around.
I think if you put it in the middle, they will. If you have it towards the tail end, then they might peter out. If there's only one more session, then I'm out of here, But if it's another big section, I think they'll stick
Sure,
around.
okay. I think I have that consensus, and I'm meeting with the team middle of next week to firm this up and get the save the dates and invites out and all of that. But if anyone else has any input, or anyone listening has any input, happy to.
Are the exhibit tables that you've suggested, those have been the ones that committees have come forward and said, this is what we're willing to do, and you haven't had anybody else?
So we solicited to boards and committees and
These are the ones that came
departments,
back
and
to
these
you.
are the ones that have so far came back. I think I gave an August 1st deadline, so there may be others that trickle in.
Not to put-
Do you have a thought?
Well, I mean, I always so there's so many interesting projects that our DPW is doing. I would love to see them use this
table.
opportunity to sort of advertise themselves. I know that they're trying to do a better job through the use of the DPW website, Facebook page, which is great. But I think they're really some of the unsung heroes that keep the town operational, and people just don't get what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think this would be great if they could have a table showing all the projects that they're working on, either completed recently or what are in play now or what's in the immediate future, because there's a ton of stuff.
I'll definitely ask. I'm sure they'll be more than
I'm
willing.
sure Kyle will be super happy to be the front man on that.
He's gonna send you a thank you note for
I
this.
know he will.
Okay, no, that's a great suggestion. So an invitation to DPW.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I think we're through.
Clear.
Okay.
For
Okay. Next up, thank you for your patience. Update on agricultural preservation restriction on 66 to 68 Boston Road. Very grateful to have so many of our members here of the Ag Committee here with us. To start, could we pull up Kristen's memo? Just to frame at least a couple things I'm hoping to get from the board tonight, and then we'll invite discussion and input. So thank you, Kristen, for putting this together. We just wanted in one place to have what town meeting has asked us to do, what our best understanding of the current intention of the property owner at that site, and the timing. And then a little bit further down is some language from the agricultural restriction itself. I guess the question I'll have, just to summarize, so Kristen's done a great job following up with the property owner. The intention is to have livestock at the site now within about 2 weeks from now. And for people who've been by the site, you can see there's been a lot of activity at the site. I guess I just wanted to get consensus of the board based on the APR language. In 2 weeks, if presuming good faith, there is livestock at that site in accordance with what's been discussed with Kristen. It would seem to me, based on the language, that if that occurs, the site will be in compliance. I guess that's my question. Does the board have any questions? I think I don't know if town council's here, but if there were any questions for him.
They are online, yes.
Okay, so based on the language for the APR, I just wanted to get consensus about whether we would interpret, based on the language, that if there is livestock on that facility within 2 weeks after that occurs, the site would be in compliance.
Is that a question to town council or to us?
If we want to hear from town council, let's get him on the line. I just want to make sure that because we're sort of at a crossroads. If we're approaching a point where it seems like in the near term we're closing in on compliance, that leads us in one direction. If we don't think the plan as described would put him in compliance, then we take a different direction. So do you want to go ahead and ask the question to town council since we have him here? Okay. Hey, Greg.
Hey, everyone.
So I don't know if you heard that, but the question that we want to investigate here is if the plan is described by the property owner, which is to have cows and pigs and chickens on that site at this point 2 weeks from now, my layman's reading of the APR language says that would put him in compliance, but that's the question that we wanted to, I guess, hear from you on and then get consensus as a board. Yes, that would put the property owner in compliance, or no, we don't think those actions would put them in compliance.
So based on what I've heard so far through you, Mr. Chair, this is more in the category of putting him on his way to compliance. What the agricultural preservation restriction requires is that the property be in active agricultural use. And so, bringing livestock onto the property is certainly a step in that direction. The keeping and raising of livestock is an agricultural use, but I would want to know more about what his ultimate plan for that livestock is, because just having sort of cows and chickens milling about the property isn't necessarily agriculture. And I haven't heard anything beyond him just simply bringing these animals onto the property as part of his plan. So, yes, it is a step in the right direction. It is agriculture, to raise livestock on the property. And so, if that is being done in a manner that is consistent with generally accepted agricultural practices, then that would eventually be compliance with the APR, in my opinion.
So raising livestock as described in the APR, if as described the property owner has animals that he's raising ultimately for slaughter, then bringing new animals to raise ultimately for slaughter, what additional, I guess, information do you think we would need to make the determination, yes, that is in compliance? Like what beyond observing that that's what's actually happening at the site would you suggest we do to be able to declare, yes, it's in compliance?
So, if I was in your position, I would want to see a plan and to say, okay, I intend to bring on, this many cows, this many pigs, this many chickens, and, this is what I intend to do with them. When they reach, slaughter age, I'm going to, send them to this facility, in exchange for compensation, which I will then use to replace that stock with new stock. This is how I'm going to care for them. This is, where they're going to be housed. This is how they're going to be fed. The whole idea of it is to be using the property to support agriculture. And so, if you have sufficient information that you can then make a reasoned judgment and say, yeah, we do. We think that this is agriculture. This is a legitimate agricultural use. Then you can find that there's compliance and there's nothing further for you to do, in my opinion.
Well, that's what we're asking for. So if, just trying to get concrete, so if beyond the plan we had, for example, number of animals, the cycle, the intent of what the animals will be, and we can fairly soon go and observe and see what the practice looks like. I guess I'm trying to get specific, something we can say, okay, whoever the right authority is for us to do it, we're going to do this in the next 2 weeks. So next time we meet on August 15th, we can say, yes, we've done what we need to do. So it sounds like more detail on kind of livestock activity, what's going on there. It sounds like something that could be a page or two.
More than that, I think.
Well, I guess there's some limitation on what we can compel if he is in compliance in terms of reporting, in terms of a report. So I want to make sure that we're requesting something that is within, our right to compel it. And I think that we'll get cooperation to a certain extent, but if it's a 25-page document and we're not giving a template to fill in, for example, I just want to make sure we're putting forward a task that's likely to succeed. So we could, for instance, make a simple fill in the blank template and say we consider this satisfactory, and we could send it to him and ask for it back. Is that, because I'm not aware of a plan that is within our rights to compel it that we would offer up as a template.
It seems.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, I haven't seen any sort of written plan from him. I've just heard verbally that, this is what he's intending to do. If he does have a written plan, we can certainly take a look at that. But as the entity that is charged with enforcement of the APR, and you're sort of like the stewards of the APR, you do have the authority to request enough information to confirm his compliance. And so I think that, just sort of asking for, I don't think it needs to be a 25-page plan, but at the same token, it needs to be enough information for a reasonable person to be able to look at it and to say, yes, I think that this is a legitimate agricultural pursuit, and therefore it constitutes compliance with the APR.
Okay, so I'm going to take comments from the board first, Mark, and then we'll make sure that we come to you. So one thing we could do is get input from the Agricultural Commission, but put forward sort of a specific form request that we'd like filled out instead of just asking for a plan in general, and get that in our hands for the next meeting, at which point there will already be, at least if we are on the timeline that the property owner suggests, there will already be livestock there. Okay, John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to, as part of that process, I'd like to ask the owner, what his intent really is. Is he just trying to hold us off, or is this a long-term plan? And is this, in conjunction with some other agricultural uses? My question for the counselor is that if he has the cows and chickens and whatever he's got on one of the sections of land, and he leaves the other two just to nature, does that count that he's got it on one? Each one of those APRs, each one of them separate. So he should be using each one of those sections for agricultural purposes. And because they're kind of, in my view, they're individual. They're not necessarily considered as a whole. And each one of them, and there are some differences, like one of them has the facility in it, and the other two don't. One of them is very fallow. You can't really grow anything on it, but the other two you can. And so my question would be, do you consider them separately, and should he be farming all three of them in order to meet the requirement?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we can certainly ask him what his, long-term plans are for the property and how he intends to incorporate the 3 parcels into that long-term plan. I've always looked at these 3 APRs as sort of one integrated unit. And, I understand that there are 3 documents, but my understanding of the history behind that was that the intent of that was to sort of break up the financing of the town's purchase. But, certainly, again, if this is a legitimate agricultural pursuit, then there should be some plan to be incorporating the entire property within that dispute, because I do think that, the entirety of that property was intended to be used for agriculture. And I think that there's got to be some recognition for the fact that, sometimes, a portion of the property needs to be fallow while another part is used. But, again, that should be part of the plan. I'm going to store I'm going to keep the animals here, for a certain period of time. And then, when that land is used up, I'm going to move into this other portion and let that part recover. That sort of thing. But, until we have the land from him, it's hard to really evaluate what is going to be considered compliance.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Chris?
Yes, so let's say we ask him to fill out this form or furnish us with a report, and he does not do it. What happens next? And I guess that's a question for council.
Yeah. So if by observing what's going on there is activity as he's described, but we don't have some of the detail you've asked for, like how the different pieces of the property might rotate, or what's the protocol of care of the animals. I think the question is what then? Because in some sense he could be in compliance. Is he not in compliance if he's actually performing activities that would put him in compliance, but he's not given us a plan? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And, you have to understand, right, that, this is not, something that is like a math equation. There's a little bit of, give and take here. And, before you're going to invoke the resources of the town to enforce this APR through a legal process, if you see that there is progress towards compliance, then that's, typically enough. But, if you give them a deadline and those deadlines are ignored, then that would justify taking further steps and being more forceful in how you communicate those deadlines.
Okay, I think I understand the answer. Do you feel?
Well, I interpret your response as we just send a more strongly worded letter, but there's really nothing behind that. I don't understand what mechanism do we have to comply this gentleman to give us this report.
So, Chris, I think it's important that when we talk about the specific details of what we would do, especially something that might ultimately involve litigation, I think part of that is a negotiation that we'd want to hold an executive session. So we could call an executive session and lay out the strategic options and the legal options that we have. But I'd want to make sure that we're not tipping our hand to a
I was looking for more generic
counterpart.
answer if we even have legal options available to us as a result of him not complying with our request for a plan, not any more specific than that.
Yeah, I think we do, but in order to get into the details of what they are and how we'd want to approach them, I think we'd want to at least first have an executive session discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I agree with that assessment. I don't want to reveal too much of the details about how we would go about enforcement. But, we have gone to court in the past to enforce this APR on the prior owner when they were using it for an unauthorized use. So, that is available to the town should it become necessary.
Okay, other questions from the board? Yep.
So I have just a couple of things. So I'm not in favor of doing any work for Ebby, and I'm not in favor of providing him with a template. What I am in favor of, and what I suggest that we do, is that we do want to report, what are you doing? everything that Greg laid out, what are you doing? What's going to happen to the cattle, the chickens, the pigs? Are they going to be slaughtered? Who's going to slaughter them? When are they going to be slaughtered? Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to feed them? Is there going to be a caretaker on site all the time? I doubt it, but exactly, so if we want to give him a list of questions for him to answer, I'm fine with that, but I'm not fine with tasking our town staff to put together a template, so.
I think the only difference between is just the formatting. I mean, I just want to make sure that if we want something specific, we tell them what it is. Because otherwise, we're going to be going back and forth. It's not a good enough plan, it's not a good enough plan. I don't want to spend time on that. I want to tell them what we want, and then
I'm fine with
either
that, then
answers
I
or
think
not.
we're on the same page. And then my other question is, and I don't know if we know the answer to this, let's say he goes forward with this and we've got cattle and chickens and pigs and whatever. Donkeys, right. Who, and I don't know if it's here in the town or some, who inspects this place to make sure that, the animals are being taken care of properly and that he's abiding by all the state rules and I don't even know what the state regs are or the laws, but who's tasked with doing that?
Yeah, so it's based upon the number of animals and the type of animals. So the Board of Health has some jurisdiction related to pig and other aspects. If there were horses on the property, there would be a barn book kept, and the animal control officer, acting as the animal inspector, would be inspecting on a yearly basis. So there are certain thresholds that if that's met based upon the number and type of animals, that there are certain jurisdictions, whether it be Board of Health or animal inspector or another jurisdiction.
So then I guess that raises
Like we had chickens. If he has chickens, he has to have annual palorum tests for those chickens, which is a state function.
Okay. And so then I guess the other question, and I don't know if it's for tonight, but if it's our Board of Health that is charged with these types of inspections, do we have somebody in the Board of Health who knows, sort of what the state rules and what the state laws are and how to inspect and what to look for? I don't know.
If you want Ray to answer tonight, or we can get that answered another time.
If you're here, Ray, if you can answer that, is that okay, Tom?
Sure.
Okay, if you can answer that.
Hi, Ray Dick, Health Director with the Westford Health Department. So, as Kristen mentioned, she's absolutely correct. It has to do with thresholds and types of animals. So the Health Department does conduct annual inspections for stables.
Okay.
And if you have pigs of 10 or more. We do not inspect for chickens or for any other type of animal. And we work closely with the animal inspector to maintain the barn book that's required by Mass General Law.
So, but if he has cattle there?
He has 9 pigs and no horses. The Health Department does not do any inspections. We don't inspect cows, pigs, donkeys. Correct. So it'd be horses and pigs, 10 or more pigs.
Do we want to ask for an action item of who the responsible state authority is for inspection for other things? I mean, there are other working farms in other towns, so there is a set of.
I'm sure there is, and I think we need to know that. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of his plan, right? If he is going to have animals there, he has to have feed for them. He has to know how many they're going to be to have food on site. He has to know when they are at optimal age for processing and when he brings in. I mean, these are all common sense things he has to know. So I think all we're asking to do is put in writing what he already has to know, and that includes what state or local inspections are you going to be required to have. He should know that. If he doesn't, he's got a lawyer who does know it, because he'll be in trouble with the state if he doesn't.
Okay, yeah, so we could add that to the request list. Did you have another question, Scott? Or
No, I just think, I was with Anita, I don't think we should want to have our town staff creating a template for him. I think there are common sense things that he's got fencing up. That fencing must accommodate X animals. I mean, he has to have already done his calculus, and I didn't really appreciate that, well, it'll be some cows, I don't know what kind. Okay, if you're breeding for meat, there are certain breeds that you get, like Angus, right? You don't get Holsteins for beef. I mean, he has to know some of this stuff, and I'd just like to see that in writing.
Okay. Okay, I think I understand at least the board's input on a plan that's shaping up here for the 15th meeting.
I mean,
so let me turn.
Well, that's not the same with chickens. Is he raising chickens for eggs or for slaughter? You know, because again, you got darn few roosters if you're going to have eggs, right? I mean, it just seems like he has to know some of the stuff that we're trying to force out of him that I think he should just be, if he's buying the stuff, he has to know the answer is. He's got receipts someplace that he's buying it. He's got tracking, where things come and go from the property. I don't think it's allowed to ask that he put that in writing. It's not 2 pages. That's not a 25-page dissertation. It's something in the middle.
Yep. Yeah, what I'm thinking is we'll send a specific list of things we want to know, and we'll give them a due date, and that'll help us as an input to determine whether he's in compliance or not.
So just following up on that,
Yep.
if Kristen is putting together a list of things that we want to know before you send it to him, if you can circulate it to us so that if there's anything else, if we see anything that hasn't been missed, each one of us can chime in.
And I'll run it by Greg as well.
And Greg, yes.
If you're interested to find a mobile chicken processing facility, please let me know, because I know a lot of people would love to have that. I don't think the state has one. And he indicated that there was one when he came to us last time, and I've never heard of one, and no one in 4-H has ever heard of one, so I'm kind of wondering what the plan is there.
Yeah, we'll also send a copy to you, Marcus, so we can get your committee's input too.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. I was going to say, the state does have a mobile processing unit, and I had the good fortune of being trained on it when it was debuted at Verrill Farm, probably before I moved to town, so 13 years ago. So it does exist, and they come to your property, and I'm the one that told Mr. Masaladin of its existence, and I applauded his thinking that he could raise, and he could, if he did it properly, he could raise a lot of meat birds on that property if it was rotational grazing type of thing. I could ad-lib a couple of things, but I did make some remarks that are about 2 minutes. I could probably get it done even quicker, that address a lot of this tonight. So if you give me the...
Yeah, please go ahead, and if there's something you feel like has already been addressed, feel free to skip.
Thank you. And then first of all, there was a discussion about, Council Corbo mentioned when the APRs went into existence, just as for a memory boost. The first was May 14th, 1997, the first APR. The second was January 28th, 1998. And then 1999, it was March 30th. So that was for $525,000 the town paid for those APRs. So in my hand here is the purchase and sale agreement that Mr. Masaladin signed in January. But these are my remarks, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Good evening. My name is Mark O'Layler. I live at 105 Concord Road. Although I am chair of the Agricultural Commission, and in that capacity, I have been engaged in a dialogue with Mr. Masaladin off and on for the past year and a half. My remarks tonight are my own. In my opinion, the challenge before you all this evening is simple. Enforce the agricultural preservation restrictions that govern the 6668 Boston Road property by respectfully but firmly asking Mr. Masaladin for an agricultural plan that clearly demonstrate that the land is being kept in quote-unquote active agricultural use. It has been 7 years since Mr. Masaladin purchased the property. Just to remind you, on January 12th, 2016, Mr. Masaladin signed the purchase and sale agreement within which there were many agreements, but to my mind, the key agreement was Agreement 9. It states, quote, if town meeting does not approve the amendment to APR 3, the buyer acknowledges and agrees that it will own the property subject to the existing APRs, and that it will use diligent efforts to comply with the terms of the APRs by developing active agricultural uses on the property. It's been 7 years. There have been goats there from time, for a period of time. There's been other activity. I think he planted winter rye a couple of times, but there's never been an ongoing plan that was actually actively engaged in. Now, we all know that town meeting did not approve the amendment to APR 3. So all the other agreements in that document mean nothing. Doesn't matter what didn't or did happen in terms of permits and siting. It doesn't matter. APR was rejected by the town. And the APR was actually rejected 2 more times, and most recently at our March 2023 town meeting, the town voted overwhelmingly to support Article 23. And Article 23 mandates that you, the Select Board, enforce the APR, and further, quote, that the Select Board work with the Agricultural Commission, the Massachusetts Land Trust Coalition, and the present owner of 6668 Boston Road to create and implement an agricultural plan. plan to begin with the 2024 growing season and to continue thereafter. A plan 2024 and continue thereafter. You know, as a small business owner, my experience has been that a plan, daily, monthly, yearly, is essential to success and relatively easy to create. As was mentioned, it's not math. You've done it before. If you're a farmer, you know what to do, and it's easy to produce. And it's also easy to assess, alter, and update. So since it's relatively easy to do, and you have been asked by the town to ensure an agricultural plan is implemented, I would respectfully encourage you to start there. As the Agricultural Commission has stated openly to Mr. Masaladin, we are interested in helping him craft an agricultural plan, which would meet or exceed the mandate of the APRs. I am certain the Commission is still committed to seeing the APRs upheld. I am also encouraged by the commitment and interest of the many citizen groups across town that care about this property and the sanctity of upholding agricultural law. Therefore, your first step may be to appoint a member of the Select Board as a liaison to the Agricultural Commission to oversee the formation and management of a 6668 Boston Road Working Group. I know many concerned citizens would be eager to lend their assistance to help create this plan. Thank you for your time and consideration of my remarks. One other note, if you've been down there recently, there are weeds that are, approaching 5 feet tall. There's very little grass, and if you just Google what plants are toxic to cows, you'll just look at them. You see tons of goldenrod all across that field. I don't believe, and I've talked to a bunch of farmers, that you could put cows and they would be, successful and healthy on the property, the forage that exists there right now. He would have to supplement, food for these animals. It's also late in the season. Typically, you put animals on pasture in April. It's close to August. So anyway, just a couple of other things to consider, but I thank you for your time, and I'm willing to help work on the suggested questions for Mr. Masaladin to help him implement that plan. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Welcome.
Juliet Mount, Boston Road, right across the street from the farm. What was a farm, was a beautiful farm. Hope to see it return that way. Couple points. One, earlier, there was a question asked as to what can we do to enforce. Referenced in the APRs consistently, Chapter 184, Sections 31 to 33 outline exactly what can be done, including restrictions may be enforced by injunction and/or other proceedings and shall entitle representatives of the holder to enter the land in a reasonable manner. I'm reading without needing glasses. Shall entitle representatives of the holder to enter the land in a reasonable manner and at reasonable times to assure compliance. You have rights to ensure adherence. Second point, very important. The foregoing restriction was authorized by Massachusetts General Law, as I mentioned, Chapter 184, Sections 31 to 33, with the intention of ensuring the protection and preservation of agricultural lands, and often referenced in the APRs, all three of them, is the inclusion of water conservation. I point to that for a number of reasons. Earlier, as an example, there was a conversation around the importance of protecting our groundwater and other problems that are showing, PFAS and other items that are showing up in our water. The CDC states on their website that animal waste manure from animal feeding operations can contaminate surface water when flooding from sites. Animal waste from animal feeding operations may contain pathogens such as E. coli. Livestock near stream banks, there is a stream and conservation land adjacent, may increase dissolved and suspended solids carried by streams and may present health hazards to downstream users. This is in a residential zone adjacent to a stream bed. Runoff and filtration transport these contaminants into local streams, rivers, and groundwater. Improperly managed agricultural activities may impact surface water by contributing nutrients, pesticides, sediment, and bacteria, and altering the stream flow. So there isn't really much more important to us than clean water. We pay to protect our groundwater. There are issues with PFAS and other contaminants that we need to pay attention to. All of these would be properly indicated in an agricultural plan, which is required of the owner. The ag plan would manage waste. There are also notes in the APRs related to I'll say bio-waste and how that can be managed, but those require approvals. Approvals that would be based on an approved ag plan, a mass ag plan. Do you have my note, my paper? Did you give it back to me already? I'll just reference that a copy of a current farm conservation plan prepared by the USDA Soil Conservation Service must be made available when requested by you. So you have the ability to stand up for it, protect us, and take care of this land and our water. And I appreciate your support of that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I have a follow-up? Sorry, you quoted something. What document has that you stated?
APR 1.
And it says...
2 and 3 actually all state that.
Can you read it again for me,
Yes,
please?
sir. I'll refer to the appropriate section for you. I think it's D2. Hold on one second. It is in all 3 APRs, by the way. Section D. Paragraph B.I. A copy of a current...
Section D, can you just read the heading of Section
Yes,
D?
approval process for permitted activities. This is
Especially
related...
permitted activities, not allowed activities. So there's a difference.
Yeah.
There is.
Well,
There is.
so what's your interpretation of the difference?
A permit is needed when pigs, cattle, etc., for a farmer whose primary business is farming on that land. Certainly if, and that is stated in the APR, that must be their primary business on the land, assuming that there is a excess of 10 heads of whether it's pigs that we would properly manage, apparently according to the Board of Health, or cattle that the state would have to appropriately oversee. Permits and appropriate adherence to public policy would be necessary. All of that would be appropriately managed and noted in a USDA Soil Conservation Service ag plan. All of that would be outlined in that plan, including waste removal. What is he going to do with the waste? We've not heard anything about that. We've not heard anything about how he's taking care of his feed. He's converted what was the farm stand into what he apparently is treating as a stable. Okay, where is the feed? Where will they waste? Where will it go? That's what's in the plan. If there isn't a plan, then we don't know. And we as residents surrounding him are at risk. Our groundwater is at risk. Okay? Fair.
Thanks. And Scott, you had a question?
Another question, since Raymond was sick of showing up tonight. What does the Board of Health have for a role in terms of animal waste if it's, under 9 pigs, under 9 cows? I mean, if at some point there's a buildup of activity, shall we say, that impacts the environment.
Sure. So for public health, we do have Mass General Law, Chapter 111, which is the nuisance regulations. So for instance, if, I don't know how high the fence is out there right now, but if animals get loose and get hit on Boston Road, cause an accident, roosters are creating a public health nuisance for noise and other things like that, the health department would then get involved, and would certainly
I was thinking of waste. I mean, if you've got
Yeah, I would say, I'm happy to help in any capacity where we do this every day to help with questions if you certainly need that when it comes to waste. And as you said, there are requirements for feed and things of that nature. But I would certainly look at what is the setback too for wetlands, which does not fall under us. So that would be something when you're talking about waste.
I mean, we're telling dog owners to pick up their dog poops in East Boston camps.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have cows, in a concentrated area.
Correct.
It seems like we want to have some kind of...
Correct. For instance, in our local regulations, lined ponding is required for 10 or more pigs, but there is nothing for cattle. So, and those animal regulations were just updated.
But there may be with the state,
Maybe there are state
Maybe,
regulations, and
Yeah.
that's kind of, that's what I was at. Because I don't know.
Right, so we'll look into who the responsible agency is for the various different aspects of what might be going on there. Mark, do you have another question?
Chair,
Yep, go ahead, Greg.
sorry to interrupt, but if I could bring to your attention and the attention of the board, so the Department of Agriculture through UMass publishes a livestock and poultry best management practices handbook. And in looking at the table of contents, it talks about sections on housing for poultry and sheep and goats, bedding for livestock and equine, fencing, nutrition, shearing, biosecurity, manure management, crops and pasture management. So, this is all information that is available to the owner through the Department of Agriculture. And my recommendation would be, through the town manager to provide him with this book and to require that he, provides you with a plan that addresses these best management practices so that the board can evaluate that this is a legitimate agricultural use.
Okay, thanks. Greg, we can take that under advisement, and maybe when we're specifically asking for what we want, we can reference sections in the guide. That's a helpful suggestion.
We also have a hand up from
Okay. Why don't we answer Mark's question and then we'll go to Emily?
I just wanted to add that my understanding is that in Massachusetts, the average size of a farm is 9 acres. And with proper fencing and rotational grazing, a lot of these concerns for fecal matter and contamination can be ameliorated and dealt with successfully. And once again, depending on the size of the operation that he intends to undertake there, but that's what we need to know, right? That's what the plan is all about. Because if he's keeping them stationary, then he's got to compost the waste, I guess. I mean, how else could he do it? But if he rotational grazes them and then keeps a part of it fallow from time to time and then moves them into the fallow paddock, it can all be done with low smell and low biohazard to the wetlands, and so it's all possible, but I think it really needs to...
We need a plan.
You need a plan to show the intent.
We got it, guys. We need a plan.
If anyone's interested in looking at this a little bit, as a good example is Codman Farm in Lincoln. It's run by Pete and Jen, who are, they have their own business, Backyard Birds. They do a lot. They do sheep, they do cows, they do pigs. Pigs on pasture is one of the cleanest things you'll ever see in your life. You can't believe it, but I told Mr. Masaladin all about this. Go to Lincoln, walk around Codman Farm, and Jen Hashley, the co-owner with Pete, runs the New Entry Farm program out of Tufts University, and they help people become farmers, and our farmer at the Graniteville site, Fala, is a graduate of the New Entry Farm program. So it all can be done if it's done, accurately, or if it's done properly. It's all possible. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Let's hear from Emily. And I'm happy to hear comments. Maybe if we can keep it focused on the topic here, which is sort of what does this board need to be satisfied as the next step that we're moving towards compliance. That would be helpful. There's lots of excellent other suggestions we may get to in other meetings, but I'm hoping we can stick to that. And we're going to go to Emily Teller first, and then back.
Yeah, she wrote that she's on her phone, that could the select board follow up with an email to someone, I can't read what that says, from Matt Salem on this land, please. So I'm assuming, I know that Mr. Masaladon has been in contact with Matt Salem, who is our conservation agent, related to the requirements that would be necessary for this use on approximate to wetlands. So perhaps she's looking for that, but Emily, you can email or call me tomorrow and we can work through that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just a quick comment.
If you could just mention your name and where you live.
Yeah, Diane Hendricks, 11 Crown Road. First off, shout out to the Highway Department for clearing up our easement and cleaning up the roads. Appreciate that. On Crown Road. You know, if you do a quick Google search, you will see how many cows that you can have on such a small property, which is not many. And also, the big concern to me are the pigs, because they can't be on cement. If you look it up, they can't be on cement. They have to have a certain bacterial barrier. And also the way that the stable is placed is really important in terms of air circulation so that the animals stay healthy. And that's the one thing that I'm really concerned about, is who's going to oversee the health of these animals and who's going to have the knowledge. I mean, let's be realistic. Who knows? I mean, unless you care for animals now, you're not going to know. So anyway, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. It's Chauncey Chu, Green Needles Road. I have no skin in this game. I don't have an opinion either or whatever you want to call, pro or con. I just like to find out about the APR. I like to understand the APR and just go through a couple of questions that I have, if you will indulge me, unless this material has been discussed previously. Tell me to be quiet, and I will. Okay. So.
Do you have a specific question, Chauncey?
Pardon me?
Do you have a specific question you want to ask?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that looks like a pretty long question. Is there any way we could focus on just what you need to know?
Sure. Under the definitions on page 1, can Eric bring up the APR instead of...
What are you looking for, Chauncey? Okay. I want to make sure we're using this time well.
Okay. Definitions on page 1 of the APR, it describes actively engaged, and that's what I think the gist of the discussion is about, is whether the 9 acres is actively engaged in agricultural. There, the definition is very specific. I want to know if the APR stands on the 4 corners of the page. Shouldn't leave anything to discussion. It's sort of ambiguous. Deriving at least 51% of annual gross farm income from agricultural uses. And then the various items for agriculture uses described, including animals. So I'd like to ask, how is the 51% determined?
So that's actually a very specific section that's below, and actively engaged is a permitted by the select board activity, not a overall allowed activity. So we can get back to you on that, because it is a very specific section within the APR and not particularly related to what is being proposed right now, but we can bring that back to the board to flush that out at the next meeting.
What I'm confused about and came to this meeting about, how do you calculate this 51% of the gross income?
So we can, why don't we respond to that, Chauncey? Kristen's point is that that's not relevant to the use case that we're talking about. So we don't need to calculate 51% in the course of action we're currently contemplating. It's only for a specially permitted use that you need to do that. So if you've got a question, maybe it would be productive, Chauncey, if you've got questions, if you want to email them to us, we can go through and give you a detailed response.
Okay. The second question I had was that we're talking about here getting a plan. I associate the plan with activities. This is on page 4, paragraph C. Activities which require prior written approval. I don't see a plan for pig farming as a listed requirement here. I see 6 items that require written approval.
You are correct. I mean, we may want to ask Greg to comment, but there are certain things where a written plan can be compelled, and then there's certain things that, there are certain specific uses where a written plan is actually required and can be compelled. And then there are other cases where, in a more general sense, as we're talking about to enforce compliance, ensure compliance, we're requesting a plan that's not required specifically to be called out. We're requesting it because we need that information in order for us to make a determination whether they're in compliance or not, if that makes sense. So in one case, there's a very clear way to compel something specific. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about here is we need enough information for us as a board to be able to determine whether he's in compliance or not.
I understand that. Okay. That's why I don't understand the APR. It's only 3 or 4 pages long. I don't find any mention of what you're talking about in the specific. You're asking for a specific plan or a plan for a specific application?
We are asking for a plan so that we can make a proper determination about whether
this is a regular agricultural practice under the retained rights section of the APR.
Right. I didn't find that section in the 4 pages. Am I reading the wrong APR?
No, it's in all 3 APRs under Section A, retained rights. He has the privacy to carry out regular agricultural practices. So the select board would like a plan so that they can determine that the use that will be on the property is going to be a regular agricultural practice. They are not asking for the USDA soils plan at this time, is my understanding.
Right.
I must be really slow tonight here. I did not understand, I did not read, and again, I'm referring to the 4 pages here, that a plan was required.
We cannot determine whether Mr. Masaladan is in compliance with the APR, is actively in active agriculture on that land, unless he gives us a plan of what he's doing.
That's what I'm confused about, because actively engaged says 51%.
That doesn't have to do with this section.
That doesn't apply to this use.
Chauncey, could we take this up offline, or we can connect you with town staff, someone who can walk through this with you, because I think we're using a lot of people's time here.
Okay, sure. I just wanted to make one final comment in that, okay, no, I think I'll have to write to you or meet with you to go over.
Okay, that'd be great.
Question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chauncey.
Ellen Hardy, 39 Main Street. Thank you, Andrea, for saying you've got it. You need to have a plan. But let's be a little clear about what that plan is. Town meeting voted in March of 2023 that the plan you are asking EBI for is an agricultural growing plan for the 2024 season. It says nothing about livestock. So your charge from town meeting is to get a plan for growing, not a plan for livestock. Now, council has said livestock may be one step in the direction, but don't go down that path. Go back and take the path that town meeting asked you to do and get the plan for the whole property, the growing plan. And then if in addition to that later, he wants to introduce livestock, include that later. But for now, it's a growing plan we need from EBI, and it's what this board is commanded to do by town meeting, because town meeting is the legislative body. And I truly hope you take that seriously, and that not one animal appears at 66 to 68 Boston Road until you have the growing plan and have the plan for that property. Otherwise, we will back into a livestock situation that we don't want there, town meeting didn't ask for, and we're not compelled to give him until we have our growing plan. Please, please, please ask Mr. Masaladan for that plan to this board by your meeting on the 15th and act on that, because it's why the Agricultural Commission brought it to town meeting. Town meeting supported it, and I really encourage the board to take that path at this point in time.
So, Ellen, thank you for that. I just want to clarify what the language that we have here is.
So I have that the town meeting vote was to create and implement an agricultural plan to begin with the 2024 growing season and to continue thereafter. I don't see that it says implement a growing plan to begin with the 2024 growing season.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Yes, Greg?
Thank you. So for clarification, what we're talking about here is the enforcement of the APRs, and in particular, the affirmative covenant that starts on page 7 says that the premises shall remain in active agricultural use and the land shall not be abandoned except in accordance with the USDA Soil Conservation Service Farm Management Plan. And earlier in the APR, it specifies that the owner retains the right to use the land for agricultural use, and it defines agricultural use to include the keeping and raising of livestock. In my opinion, if the owner uses the property for an agricultural use, the town does not have the authority to dictate what that agricultural use is. So in my opinion, the board cannot say you need to grow certain crops or any crops if he is otherwise engaged in an agricultural use, which could be the raising of livestock in and of itself. And so the purpose of the plan is so that the board can confirm compliance, but it's up to him to demonstrate what agricultural use the property is going to be put to and how that use is going to be conducted so that it is a legitimate agricultural purpose.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. It's my understanding as well. Do you have another question?
Yes, I have
Chauncey?
another question here.
Yeah, and maybe this will be the last, if we heard from everyone who wants to speak, this may be the last question we have tonight.
Okay. Again, on paragraph 4, second paragraph, I just wanted to point out, and I may be stretching here, but it seems like this whole topic has been stretched. It says here, nothing here shall impose upon the grantees any duty to maintain or require that the premises be maintained in any particular state or condition. So I think by asking for a plan, you're going against that requirement.
No? I think it is, and you heard counsel speak earlier that in the course of determining whether the property is being exercised in compliance, we can ask for a plan as we've described. So that's the intent of this body.
Okay. I disagree, but.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Thanks, Chauncey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So to recap, our intention is to request what we would like to see in a plan, request the specific elements that we would like to see appear that would satisfy us that we will have the information with that plan to determine if it's operating in compliance or not. We're going to circulate that here. We're going to ask for input from Mark and his group, give them an opportunity to add their opinion and suggestion, and then we will send that to the property owner with a due date. We would like to get that done by the 15th. We'll have to see whether we can get our document together and our request in the right place.
And it depends on what we can do, yes.
So we need to give them a reasonable period of time to respond. So I think it'll either be the 15th or the meeting after, depending on the pace at which we get the input together.
Mr. Chair, can he legally bring stock in until that happens? Or what's the status of him saying within 2 weeks there will be animals there?
Just if you're online, the question is, can he bring livestock on? I believe he can. I'll defer to counsel, but he owns the property and it's an approved use under the APR restriction. I guess the question to you, Greg, is there any, legally, could he begin to bring livestock onto the property at this point?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, unless there is some other provision of law that would prohibit him bringing livestock onto that property, the APR does not prohibit him from bringing livestock on the property. It is his property. He has retained rights, and it's my opinion that the town, under the APR, cannot prevent him from using it as his use space.
Thanks. Andrea?
I have sort of one or maybe two questions. Anyway, so my first question is, before he brings livestock on, can we enter the property and make sure that there's an inspection or something that shows that the livestock is going to be well cared for, and, you know, and that he's made the appropriate arrangements? And if we can't, then can we go like the day after he brings the livestock in to inspect the property? Because if he's not complying with state regulation, then do we have the authority to basically tell him he has to remove the livestock?
I'll defer to council, but presumably we could notify the proper inspection authority that there's a site that's not in compliance, and they would, you know, exercise the process.
I think so, but I
that they
just wanted
have.
to ask, right?
No.
For you, Mr. Chair, I suggest that you reach out to the Department of Agriculture and find out what their requirements are for the keeping of livestock and what inspections they require before livestock can be brought to a site, and defer to their jurisdiction in that regard.
Okay, so we'll seek out the proper authority with jurisdiction, and then we'll understand what steps we're legally entitled to take.
So Bob Jeffries also has his hand up.
I don't mind taking two other quick questions. So,
Quick.
Yep.
I promise. Under section C3, note for prior written approval, there is reference to a need for prior written approval for when the maintenance or improvement of a septic or other groundwater sanitary system would, which exists on the premises, or other construction of septic, et cetera, needs to be managed. So, given the reference to livestock and groundwater and necessary septic containment, I think that itself merits adherence to a reasonable ag plan and written approval before he proceeds with bringing livestock on the premises. It's reasonable.
So I guess what we'll do, we can ask council if we think the language as written here would be triggered by any action that he's taken. And certainly if he's required to do certain things based on triggering certain events, then, you know, we'll ask compliance. But Greg, I don't know if you want to take a minute or take some time to consider whether any action's been taken that would trigger this provision.
Not that I've seen. I have not been provided with any information to suggest that he is installing or doing work on a septic system. You know, I think when we talk about waste disposal in this context, we were talking about waste disposal from livestock, not from people.
Okay, thank you for that. And Bob has a question.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Bob. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of this seems to be very academic, because under the definitions, this farm has been abandoned for 7 years. It's had a tax breaks for 7 years that it shouldn't have had. So I think you've got all the leverage you need in the fact that under the definitions in the APR, they have not made money in 7 years. They've not been a farm in 7 years. They therefore became an abandoned property. And the fact that they got a tax break for being a farm when they weren't a farm is kind of a critical thing going here. So I think you have all the authority in the world to demand of them what you need to get, and stop worrying about whether you have the authority to ask for a plan or not. Go on the basis of the fact that Mr. Masaladon has not lived up to the requirements of the APR in any way, shape, or form, having abandoned the farm for 7 years. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I think the board has agreed that we are going to move forward and put together a request for a plan as described, so that will remain our course of action. John, did you have something you were trying to say? You're on mute? Okay, I'm sorry, John. I saw your lips moving and wondering if you were offering something up.
Is it a prayer?
Yeah, a prayer would be good. Okay, unless there's any other comments from the board or questions, I think we'll move on to the next item. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So discussion of upcoming select board meeting dates in August. I think this is sort of a formal discussion around having the meeting on the 15th.
Right, I mean, Kristen sent out an email about, sort of our August meetings. I know folks are on vacation. We have in the past only had one meeting in August if it merited it. Quite frankly, it sort of depends upon what's on the agenda. It sounded like you were putting a lot of things on the agenda for the 15th, Tom.
I have a feeling that we're not going to get all these things lined up for the 15th.
Yeah, so I started compiling, and my question was, if we do meet on the 15th, is there any flexibility in starting earlier? I know there are job schedules and things like that, or we need to cut some things and move it to September 12th if we don't meet on August 22nd.
I can't getting here at 6:30, as you saw, was hard enough for me, so I can't get here.
I think we'll just have to manage the agenda.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Realistically, if Amoresco is going to deliver it in the middle of August, and we want a week to review it, it's not going to be the 15th. So
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that we're going to have all these blockbusters at once. Okay, do we need to vote to change the meeting date or no?
I don't think so.
I guess I'm the chair. I was going to move it. Okay, it's on the 15th.
15th.
Okay.
We will change the calendars and let the department heads and other interested parties know.
Okay.
15th at 7 p.m.
Board reports updates. Briefly, I wanted just to mention that the Budget Task Force has been chugging along. If you want a long-form version of what the group's been up to, you can look at the recording from last night's listening session at Millennium. But in general, we're on track to report back to you on time, and the committee is really engaged. Right now, we're doing more outreach to peer communities and to the departments. That's taking a little bit of time, but in general, we also will share with you the working draft of the report, which we now have a working draft of. Maybe in a week or so, we'll be ready just to send you a link. You can go and take a look at how it's evolving and share any input that you might have.
Have you talked with DPW yet?
I'm sorry?
Have you talked with DPW yet?
The benchmarking committee is doing that. We've sent out questions to DPW, and we're arranging a meeting for them for next week.
Okay, you haven't met, okay.
Yeah. And it was on the schedule for the budget task force to give an update to the school committee, the select board, and the finance committee on August 15th, but we will talk about that schedule and how that lines up to give that update, formal update.
Yeah, we'll try to give you some
It would be helpful to, even if, by August 15th, and I know your timeline, it would really be helpful to hear something, even if it's just an interim report from you folks.
Sure. So what we're pulling together now is basically the beginning of the draft. So you'll be able to see all the different new revenue opportunity size. You'll be able to see all of the different sort of the budget challenges specifically quantified. How much money are we talking about for these budget busting things like contracts and trash and special education tuition and other things. So there'll be a lot to see. What you won't have yet will be some of the efficiency suggestions that will result from these interviews. But you'll have the basic blocking and tackling of how much money are we talking about, where are we looking for additional revenue, et cetera. Okay, minutes for approval, regular session June 27th and July 11th, and executive session not for release June 13th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So I'll move to approve the regular sessions of June 27th and July 11th.
Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
And I'll move to approve the executive sessions of the June 13th, 2023, but not for release.
Second.
All those in favor, Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Town manager's report.
Thank you. I will try to be as brief as possible. The first matter is to request the release of a proposal for the disposition of 2 non-buildable parcels located on Pine Tree Trail and Burn Place, as illustrated in your meeting packet. In the October special town meeting, the town meeting authorized the select board to dispose of these 2 properties as they were taken by tax title. We reviewed the properties and have created a request for proposal with town council to sell each property individually. We will not be selling the easements associated with Pine Tree Trail and Burn Place, which are hashed in the documents related to above. We've worked with the assessor's office to properly value the properties and set a minimum bid price, as well as request $2,500 as part of that price related to our legal costs for reimbursement of that. So before we release that proposal, we wanted to get the blessing of the board, as that was the next statute related to the town meeting vote.
Okay.
Do you want to vote now, Tom?
Do you need to vote? Do you want to tackle that one separately on the list?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
So I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Chris?
Aye.
Andrea? John?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we'll get that out on the street tomorrow for bidding and notify the proper abutters and other parties. The next item, I know that the select board does not have the jurisdiction per se for the classification plan. That falls with the town manager, but traditionally the town manager has brought that pay and classification plan to the select board. For fiscal '24, it was in the budget for a 2% cost of living increase, so we've adjusted the classification table to include that. That was not done in June before the new fiscal year, so I just wanted to bring that as a formality to the board, and also just let you know that I am working with Human Resources and Finance Department on any merit increases. Those I will discuss with you in executive session before they're brought forward. Have been having conversations with department heads about performance appraisals and that merit increase. So this is strictly for the 2% cost of living that was incorporated within the budget that was approved at town meeting in March.
Any comments or feedback to Kristen on that? Okay, thanks.
Okay. Do I have a motion to?
Do you need to vote?
Do you need a motion?
Because it's under your, isn't it under your?
It is under mine. You have approved it in the past, so I was just sticking. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All those in favor, John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on to contracts, FM generator to extend our 1-year contract for fiscal '24 for annual service and inspections for all town and school generators in the amount of $7,800 as requested by the facilities department. An impact, speed, and agility for 1-year contract extension to provide recreation programming in the amount of $23,000 as requested by the recreation department. Conservation works for the construction of the public footbridge across Pond Brook at the O'Brien Farm Conservation Restriction in the amount of $63,415. The board has reviewed this in the past. They were asked for ARPA funds. The Conservation Commission and Conservation Agent were able to find those funds another location, and this is the favorable bid that came up. And then the Upper Merrimack Valley Reserve Corps Coordinator Nancy Burns, her annual salary, $47,000 requested by the Health Department. So those are the contracts.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Chris?
Aye.
Andrea? John?
He
I
said
saw
aye.
your lips. Scott?
Aye.
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 And then rounding out with the purchase orders, so Cornerstone Construction and Remodeling for the restoration of historic windows at the Parkerville Schoolhouse in the amount of $36,314 by the Facilities Department, and Comcast for SIP circuits for the town phone system in the amount of $14,000 as requested by the Technology Department. This is more of a minutia. We had incorrectly cited $1,400 at the June 13th, so we
About
wanted
a
to change
zero.
that. Yes, we did.
Move to approve.
All in favor? Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Aye.
Move to waive reading of correspondence, which there appears to be none.
Second.
All those in favor? John?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Aye.
Move to
And-
adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Thank you, and good night, Westford.